With that, good morning. Welcome to the December 19th board meeting of the Super Board of Directors. In a very rare instance, I will be starting the meeting. With that, Amy, could you please go ahead and do roll call first, and then I will be glad to hand over the gavel here shortly.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. We'll start with a roll call. Board Member Audette.
Here.
Board Member Cry.
Present.
Board Member Watkins.
Here.
Board Member Gallagher. Board Member Jones.
Here.
Board Member Kellstrom.
Here.
And Board Member Resner.
Present.
Great. With that, Executive Director Tejan, we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Amy. With that, we will move on to agenda number 2, which is to elect a chair and vice chair to preside over SRTA meetings between now and February 2025. As mentioned, recent local elections have resulted in changes to our board, which has, in a rare instance, resulted in us not having a chair or vice chair. I'd like to ask the board members this morning to discuss and cast votes to elect a chair and vice chair to serve until our February 2025 board meeting. The reason until February is that there are still 3 jurisdictions, 2 cities in the county that will have their mayor select or board select meetings to identify who all of their members will represent the various boards across the region. And those council assignments you don't usually receive until January. So every February, we usually then do nominations for chair, vice chair for entire year. So with that, I will ask for, last thing is current rotation. As we try to rotate member representation Reading has been chair this year. Shasta Lake has been the vice chair. With that, I'll hand over for motions for nominations for chair and vice chair.
I'll make a motion to reverse that order and make Greg Watkins the chair and Vanessa Audette the vice chair.
I'll second. And then we redo that in February.
Yes, correct.
I'm good with that.
So do it for 2 months and then I guess I'll be the chair then. Unless you want to reverse that.
I'm fine.
All right, Amy, could you do a roll call vote? We have a motion by Kellstrom and a second by Cry for Mr. Watkins to be chair and Ms. Audette to be vice chair.
Great. Yes, I can do that. Board Member Audette.
Yes.
Board Member Cry.
She was questioning. I'm like, what are we talking about? Oh, we're doing roll call. Sorry.
Yeah. Board Member Cry.
Yep.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom.
Yes.
And Board Member Resner.
Also, yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Just want the record to show that Chris did that because you know he's going to probably run that.
Oh, there you go. I'm going to hand over the gavel.
That's
You guys,
I know, how does a W get before a J and a K and an R?
Hey, I complained about that for many times, and I am so impressed that Amy finally picked it up and she's doing it by first name alphabetical.
No.
If you keep making statements like that, I'm rescinding my vote.
Revote.
Yeah. Come on. You'd expect that out of Cotton. Shasta Lake and Anderson.
Well, I only got appointed to this last night, so.
More than I feel that.
Right. So we are now at the point for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John, you want to introduce the staff that you have here today?
Yeah, happy to do so, Chair. Good morning, Sean Teachin. With us, we have legal counsel, John Kenny. Online helping us manage the meeting is Executive Assistant Amy Lindsay, Senior Transportation Planner Michael Cooker, and Assistant Transportation Planner Laurent Beauregard. And here in the office, we have Associate Transportation Planner Manuel Nandini, the Senior Transportation Chief Fiscal Officer Jessica Carlson. Keith is on vacation, and Senior Transportation Planner Jennifer Pollum is down to the other end of the weather, so she's participating remotely this morning. Those are staff introductions.
Okay, I see we have no staff, no workshop and no presentation. We're now public comment period. Anybody wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. And we have the consent calendar. We will not discuss those unless somebody wants to remove, any board member wish to remove one to discuss it.
No, we'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar. Amy, are we doing roll calls on that or just a voice or where are we?
We don't need a roll call vote on that. But Chair Watkins, if you would, please repeat the first and the
Yes.
second for me every time, just to make sure.
Aaron made the motion. I think Chris Kelson made the second.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. We are now to item 9 to receive executive director's report. Sean?
Thank you, Chair and Board. I do have a few items this morning to mention. I'll start off a couple of prior items we reviewed. Our 2024-25 Federal Transportation Improvement Program was approved by the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration last week. So we're happy with that, that all of our federal projects that are in GAFTEP were approved. I see a letter related to that and the correspondence, part of consent. With that, staff has already initiated discussions with city, county, and Caltrans partners to prepare Amendment 1 for projects that have been waiting for that approval so that they can have as needed, whether it's funding or schedule adjustments made to their projects and get that reflected so they can move forward. So we're anticipating getting that moving and in the process and out in mid-January. Our every 10 years, we talked about last time, our master fund transfer agreement. I'm happy to announce that last week we received notice that our 10-year master fund transfer agreement with Caltrans was approved and signed. It is effective essentially from January 1st, 2025. Great news about that is that we can continue to conduct our planning and programming functions core to this agency, and our partners can continue to receive their transportation funds. So we will see those continue to roll as we anticipate. So we were glad we stayed working with Caltrans. We appreciate it. Caltrans headquarters and district staff helping us keep that moving forward quickly and getting that resolved mid-December. If you've been tracking the federal budgets and continuing budget resolution, as you may be aware, the current federal budget has only been approved through midnight, Saturday, December 21st. Congress is working on another continuing resolution that funds federal agencies and programs through what I understand is approximately March 2025. They're not doing some full budget approval that would go through the entire federal fiscal year, which is from September through October is a federal fiscal year. In terms of what does that mean for us? Should there be any delays in the continuing resolution, we don't anticipate seeing any issues or very, very minor impacts, if any, related to transportation planning or capital funds that are handled through the Federal Highway Administration. That's primarily managed through existing processes, and those are not usually impacted by the continuing resolutions, other than where Congress has discretion of adding additional funds to infrastructure projects and programs that they may have. However, like what we saw last year in the series of continuing resolutions, there were some impacts with funds that are overseen by the Federal Transit Administration. So we are tracking and monitoring this, and we're staying in discussions with RABA the way that if we anticipate anything. I know last year we did have it where that ran into some challenges getting the final funds allocated, the agreement signed with FTA, so that RABA had those. We're staying in discussions with them in case we see any challenges taking place. But for now, we're not seeing any right now. I would have more concern over a continuing resolution in March that, depending on how it goes, we're not talking about a full budget approval for federal fiscal year. So we'll continue to see how that plays out. But in the short term, we won't see much impact to us in our projects. We have been holding, since we last met, I've participated in a couple of meetings related to Senate Bill 375 and meeting with our several of our MPO partners, including the big four, the four largest, some of our San Joaquin Valley MPOs and some of our small MPOs meeting with California Air Resources Board, Caltrans headquarters, California Transportation Commission, and staff from the Housing and Housing Community Development Department. Related to our regional transportation plans, our planning process, and Senate Bill 375, and how that plays into the SES, what we call the Sustainable Community Strategy components. The last two meetings have been, I think, a little more candid, which is good. I think we've seen a little bit of progress. Some things we talked about. We did have some candid discussions about what has changed in the last 15 years since Senate Bill 375 was enacted. Notably with zero emission vehicles, with things that the state has done in terms of a variety of programs, with the planning processes and what we've learned about whether or not Senate Bill 375 is really providing the tools for streamlining that was anticipated for housing projects, in transportation projects, even in our big areas. Very few projects have benefited from that. So can there be some re-looking at that to where it lessens the process, it helps actually improve things, does actual streamlining so we can lower costs, make things more affordable. That plays more into the local side, but it is a question of, is there anything that could be done to enhance that so there's a greater benefit than what has been in place? We've also been talking about in educating our existing state agency staff, because there's been a lot of turnover between the different state departments of folks that have not necessarily been here through the whole years. I remember when I was doing it, I was back in college when it first was enacted and started as a young planner. So I've been through much of that process the last 15 years of what's taken place. But at a state level, we've had a lot of change in our staff. So a lot of people we've lost knowledge transfer from those that were here about what the purpose and the goal was at the time, the discussions, where's that at today? So I think we've been able to hopefully, I think, articulate and explain and get clarity with our state partners and the staff there about what our planning processes are, what we're required to do, and how we carry those out, and how this really aligns with some of the things that have been suggested recently. We've also had some discussion about CAR's most recent set of RTP SCS guideline updates, and frankly, why they don't work.
Couple things.
Mhm.
One, can you tell them what SB 375, the detail, like
So-
some broad overview, and then can you tell them what those two acronyms you just said were, because I spent 2 days out there and everybody uses those acronyms as if we all know what they mean.
Yeah. So RTP Regional Transportation Plan, that's our 20-year planning document for all of our transportation projects. As a component to that is a sustainable community strategy, which is specifically focused on how we could look at achieving a greenhouse gas target that is set by the California Air Resources Board for our region through combined land use and transportation strategies. That current target that we have is a -4% by per capita. And we go through a set of planning steps to then show a technical methodology of the technical tools we would use.
To get people to drive less.
To get people to drive less and reduce emissions.
Yes.
Yes, that is the focus there.
And for the benefit of the rest of this board, so you don't fall asleep during this process, I will say, one of the things that came out of the meeting that we went to is the fact that having a electric vehicle does not make people drive more. And it does, in fact, to lower emissions, that they'll just drive these electric vehicles because it's so much cheaper to own and to drive. So there's lots of interesting studies that are coming out now that we've been doing this for a while, which will affect all of the funding and how this is actually going to be sustainable.
Great. And one of the things we've had is we've had some frank conversations since the 2019 guidelines that CAR put out about things that they added and how those don't work well with our planning
Are you saying
processes.
CARB or CARB?
CARB.
Okay, thank you.
California Air
Air
Resources
Resources
Board.
Board.
Okay, thank you.
Specifically, clarifying what the regulation says they are supposed to do, what is not within the regulation. So we're clarifying that and going over those details. Also, with the guidelines that they put out, we have discussed a number of elements where we're like, hey, you're asking for all of this detail beforehand that has not been through our public process, that has not sought input from the community and from our board about the strategies and approaches that we want to take that we think are appropriate for our region. We can't give you those as staff because we need to go through that planning process and the outreach process to get input on what do those strategies look like and what's the preferred scenario for the next 20 years. Once we have that, we can actually have the details, provide them with technical all this technical stuff and modeling and other things that take place. So I'm still optimistic on that, so they're understanding that process a little bit more. We'll see. The other thing that we had is we did identify a set of topics for our next two meetings. We have one scheduled in January. And we anticipate we will have one in February. To have a deep dive on several topics about how we can improve the process while also listening to Burma MPOs and regions. So we will see how that plays out. Our goal is to focus on administrative items that we can with the Air Resources Board. We will see how successful we are there on that process, rather than focused on legislative items, which would take a much larger agreement across the MPOs as well as state agencies and how that plays out. And on the legislative side, it has different impacts to the different agencies and how they'd have to look at that. So we're hoping that we'll be able to address or start looking at addressing some items on the administrative side. One additional item with that's been going on is that there has been an ongoing request asked the Air Resources Board to pause the target setting process until these meetings are done. The first request that the Big Four MPOs made on behalf of the regions in November was, well, we'll see and get back to you. Because of schedules of everyone for executives, they did not have a chance to meet this month. So we're hoping that we'll hear back early next month on that process. That's what I have related to that item. More to come probably at our February meeting. And hopefully I'll have some better progress made and we'll see how that plays out.
I mean, Sean, we did get that one letter that they declined to pause, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did get that when they say they weren't, after that letter had been sent out, the Big Four requested another meeting with the executives at the Air Resources Board, HCD, Caltrain Headquarters, and CTC. Obviously, most of it is discussing with the Air Resources Board. They wanted to go back and discuss internally what that looks like. CARB's argument is that, well, their processes are defined in regulation, which is true, about, a target setting process they have to go through. But that's still about 2 years out. And so we have some time to have some good conversation about how to improve things before we just jump in. If not, we anticipate we'll be doing a more formal process of responding about the guideline updates they've requested, as well as been trying to address the targets. But we're waiting to see when we hear back from the Big Four and MPO executives on that side to their directives. So more to come in by February.
What's the penalty for
For what?
meetings?
So
Did you say meetings?
without going into all the weeds of it, here's what happens. If we don't have a RTP, regional transportation plan, and significant strategy that the Air Resources Board says yes would meet your targets, we're at risk of not being able to apply for planning funds for SRTA or for the local agencies for a number of things. It could even have
So project stop?
projects. Well, yes. So we would have certain core functions we have as a federal agency, as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, continue. When it comes to state funding, it may impact funds that we pursue for planning funds. It could impact capital funds that we go for without having that. There are a couple of things that CalCog is looking to address, and I think on the item about board meetings, Board Member Audette may be able to talk about that a little bit as well, what was discussed with the CalCog board meeting. But CalCog is going to be working on some different legislative item proposals to address that concern of if you don't have it approved and instead of an approved sustainable community strategy, you have instead a alternative planning strategy, which is we can't make the target, but in order to do so, here's what would be needed, type of a thing. There have been a number of concerns about the way existing regulation is that if you have an APS, as we call it, alternative planning strategy.
There's no prizes that this.
So at the end
No,
of
I'm
the day,
saying, that's my point. Nobody knows what you're talking about. If you don't just say it out, we're not so
the
familiar. that
short
we-
is we would be at risk of receiving state planning and capital funds for transportation. If we don't find a way, at least.
So we don't have projects happening here. It's
We don't have
basically,
projects happening. At the end of the day, the RTP is to say, given a certain scenario with a whole bunch of assumptions that built into that, we think we can achieve the targets by 2030.
It's a shame we couldn't have asked these questions while I was here.
That's kind of the short end. We'll be diving into this a lot more starting next year, we start, embarking on our next update to the regional transportation plan, and we'll go through those different steps and what that means and definitions and, kind of the outreach and the alternatives and options we have moving forward. So as we get ready for the next plan over the next 3 years. On staffing, I have a couple brief announcements and then we can go to the next items. First, sadly, I am announcing that recently Mehdi had let us know that he is going to be taking a job at Caltrans headquarters. His last day is going to be December 26th. I appreciate all the work he's done the last 2.5 years, and while I'm sad to see him go, I know it will afford his whole family some additional opportunities. With that, I do want you to know that as of last week, we already have a job posting out to fill his position, with an emphasis on hiring someone with a technical background and who can help us with modeling work and working with modeling consultants on there. And with that, we have all of our projects have what we call our backup buddies. So we have folks that are involved in those and everything. So I anticipate minor impacts to us in terms of our projecting work while we wait to fill that position. So with
Thank
that,
Congratulations.
Yeah, you came a long way in your PowerPoints. You cut those down. I appreciated that. Take that fervor.
and as a going away president, he has one more presentation for you.
Okay. Good deal.
We're gonna totally make him do it with no script.
There you go. One happy note to say is that on the accounting clerk effort to hire a individual for that position, we had a offer accepted this week. And so we're hoping to have that person come on board mid-January once they get through the pre-employment hiring phase. So it's still a contingent offer until they can complete all of those necessary steps and then they can get started. So good news on that front. We'll hopefully have a finance person on board to help us and Jessica. So with that concludes my updates for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So have any board members attended a meeting that they need to report on?
Yes.
I was like, sounds like it.
We did. We went to the CalCog, which is basically our lobbying arm for all of the NPOs and the council of governments. And the question that I asked that we could have asked our governor is what is going to be the priorities if federal funding goes away or is changed, redirected, reprioritized? What is going to be the priority as far as transportation, education, public safety? What will California backfill? But specifically for transportation, a lot of the electrification plans, rely on a lot of federal funding. So if that goes away, then what should we expect to happen, not happen? And then what is the state going to do? Is it going to backfill those things? That would have been a great question that we could have asked. So that was really my question, which obviously they don't think that all this federal funding is going to go away because they have 2 more years of the
Infrastructure investment.
Yeah.
The
The inflation one. So I don't know that is true. I don't think that that's how that works, but so I don't know that they're bracing necessarily for that inevitability. But I do think the director said that he was part of SB 375 when that was written, and thinks that there needs to be some adjustments and changes because there's now data, I think, that we were talking about briefly, and for some jurisdictions, like data to say that the stuff is not working. And in addition, these sustainable action plans, they're not being approved right? They have 10 months to approve, or what is this supposed to be the turnaround?
Air Resources Board is supposed to approve
In like 30
60 days.
60 days. And it's like a couple of years for some of these. So it's not being approved. So the alternative planning strategies, I think they've had maybe 1 or 2 of those approved, but basically they're coming back with data saying that stuff's what they expected is not what's working. The modeling is not accurate. I know we're all shocked. But so I think that there's a lot of, I would say, uncertainty as to what's going to be funded, uncertainty as to if these goals are actually attainable, what is going to be the pivot. I think that CalCog wants to write some of its own. I think there's 2 bills he was trying to
With housing, so there's regional housing need allocation.
so he was trying to merge divide 375 by 598 and like, SB 152 or whatever, to sort of figure out a middle ground of like how they can, meet these goals. But, some other municipalities, especially down south, have taken on these larger budgets to do these larger projects, and they still owe a lot of money on them. And we're not in that boat where we've bit off more than we can chew, and now we're at the mercy of the state being able to reimburse us or whatever. So I guess in that respect, we're in a better position. But I do think that the electrification goals will likely get pushed, because I don't think that there's going to be funding for it, or I don't think that the modeling and the data backs up, the lofty goals that were set. So you have another take on it?
I think, a couple of takeaways we had from it, as well as that just the first time the CalCog director in like his 15 years has actually proposed essentially, instead of work with others about legislation, helping craft some language, is actually having CalCog sponsored bills on behalf of all of the regions. So I think you had definitely concern. What I saw was from elected members across the board, whether it was in the LA area or if it's in Shasta County, Lake, Tahoe, Fresno, a number of concerns with SB 370, Senate Bill 375, the RTP process. Some of the concerns about some of the things being pushed were the reality of what's actually taking place, the impact it potentially may have on future state funding for transportation, as well as needing to have a realistic expectation of like how much housing really can be built in a given year. And what does that mean when we talk about this, and the differences between what the regional agencies are more in tune with the locals, with what's happening on the ground, versus a number of state policies and or regulation being passed are a little out of sync about what's happening.
So one of the things that we're not having to worry about here is, so there's certain numbers set of, you have to have these many, Serena, right? Like you have to have this many housing units built.
Mhm.
Are we exempt from that?
So
Or
we're not
or
exempt.
we just don't have that same impact issue?
We don't have an issue in terms of the regional agencies that serve as a council of government. It's an unfunded mandate for them. So they have to utilize other funds, planning funds that they have to be able to try to pay for it. And it's been a long-term issue. In several regions, they've actually had to essentially figure out what that cost is, and it's an additional fee to their members that make up their jurisdiction to carry out the process. We don't carry that out because we're on council of government. HCD, so Housing Community Development at the state level, does that for a region. We as the MPO and RTPA participate through the process, so we're informed, but it is essentially an agreement between the cities, the county, and HCD relating to the number of housing units expected during an 8-year period to build, and then what can be accommodated between jurisdictions.
So what that translates into is that when we're down there, there's a lot of groups that's their main focus. So we're not discussing that as a board and dealing with that. Those other entities, which talk about this quite often, which is why CalCog put a bill together to get some funding to actually fund some of those things, because they want housing near transportation, like in those metropolitan areas and stuff. So that's not the direct issue for this board. So that is often what takes up a lot of the time. One of the other things that probably will be helpful is that CalCog is going to start creating some videos so that we have a better understanding of what they're talking about all the time, and what all these acronyms are, and what our responsibilities are, and what the differences between downs, in some other areas, because there's a group, we're all there as transportation agencies, but we do different things, and we're responsible for different things. So there is going to be some good information, I think, coming out of it to better equip us all for what we're being asked to do and weigh in on.
Mhm.
So
That sounds about it. Yeah.
that sounds good.
Very informative. Anybody else, any other board members? Moving on to item 11. This is our overall work program, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Michael comes up and gets ready here. He's going to be presenting about our planning priorities for next fiscal year. And with some newer on the board or back on, I know this may seem a little early, however, We like to get your input early in the process on the general priorities and focus areas. Because at our February meeting, we'll need to provide a full detailed work program for planning and programming activities in February, so that we meet a March 1st deadline to submit that to Caltrans and our federal partners for review, so that we can then improve a final work program in April. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Michael to present.
Thank you. Laurent, can you maximize that window? Click the green button. Yep, that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chair Watkins and member of the board. I'm here to talk to you today about our preliminary regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year 25-26. Next slide, please. Arrow keys. Thank you. The regional planning priorities feed directly into our overall work program, and this is the first step in a process that will be explained on the next slide. So the overall work program, what is it? Its primary purpose is an application for federal consolidated planning grant funds, also known as CPG funds, and it also serves as a contract for state grant funds. It also serves secondary purposes of being an agency work plan, a tracking tool for the board of directors, and a monitoring tool for our partners and the public. Next slide, please. This is the first in a three-step process. That OWP is an annual document. It's developed in 3 stages shown. December, we develop proposed preliminary regional planning priorities and take them to you for your review and input. Then in February, we take the regional planning priorities and develop a work plan based on those, incorporating board and state feedback. That includes the full draft OWP document, overall work program document with work elements and all that good stuff. The board then reviews that and provides direction. Then incorporating direction, we complete and finalize the OW work plan program and take it to the board for your approval in April. So we're in the first step now. Our proposed regional planning priorities are carryovers from the current fiscal year. Next slide. The first is to improve regional significant corridors. This will include ongoing work such as the Fix 5 Gateway project, implementation of the Envision 273 plan, and ongoing collaboration with Caltrans and other partners for the Pitt River Bridge replacement. Next slide. Next priority would be to enhance goods and freight movement. That includes work like the Fix 5 Cascade program, and we're proposing developing a regional freight plan using state funds. Next slide. We're also going to continue to strengthen data and performance-based planning. This will include work like the SRTA regional data dashboard, improving and updating the travel demand model, and ongoing data collection. Next slide. We also propose to continue supporting active transportation in the Shasta region. This will include work like an update to the Go Shasta Active Transportation Plan and continuing our partnering with local jurisdictions on grant applications. Next slide. Improved delivery of public transportation. This includes ongoing collaboration with DHCL and RABA, Dignity Health Connected Living and Reading Area Bus Authority, implementation of the short and long range transit plans, and implementation of the bus and passenger rail plan, which we'll be talking about, I think, on the next agenda item. Next slide. Continuing the plan for the zero emission vehicle ZEV infrastructure transition. This may include items such as ongoing collaboration with the North State Super Region and technical support and grant writing to support regional partners. Next slide. And the final priority is to improve public engagement with the planning process. This will include a required update to our public participation in Title VI plan, as well as ongoing work on the data dashboard. Next slide. So these are the proposed preliminary regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, and we'd like to hear any input you'd like to provide on that.
Any questions for Mike?
The the I-5 project, we're still considering doing a third lane and making it a dedicated right lane, and that would be the far left lane. Is that correct?
As far as I know, Sean.
The number one lane is what would be converted, and there's other questions. District Director Dave Moore's here too.
You didn't make some minor changes without, when they're not looking.
I don't know if that's feasible.
Well, anybody else on that? Of course, a key component is to get it 6 lanes all the way to Shasta Lake first before they can do that.
Is that it?
Well, but this project is gonna, that third lane will be a dedicated truck route, but it's in the way far left lane. I just have concerns that the trucks are not gonna move from the number 1 lane.
What could go wrong?
To the number 3 lane over a 1.5 mile period and then go, and then
How does the truck pass another truck? It wants to pass.
There are going to be some real planning or education to get the truck drivers to do that. And I think your concern is right, but Caltrans, I think their approach was they need to get the 3rd lane, they can try it, but once we have the 3rd lane, they can always restripe it and move it back. So got to get it 6 lanes all the way, try it, and then evaluate.
Well,
Is it safe to assume that it is versatile and it's like what can go in there, when and how it's, I mean, it's a center lane.
No, they're not allowing small vehicles.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying like if there's a high occupant, it's HOV lane and you say, oh, but it's open on Saturdays and Sundays, anybody can drive in there on Saturdays and Sundays. Is it built in such a way that it's only made for trucks, or can it be versatile in its use if it's?
We are going through that process of evaluating that really, and that brought some questions is we don't need it for trucks 24 hours a day.
Right.
And obviously it doesn't make sense for a truck to move over at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's no traffic there. So we are looking at, can we operate and function in windows that allow us to open that up? Unfortunately, day one, we open that, we may or may not be able to do that the way our environmental documents handled, but we are looking at that. It is an opportunity to look at. We have a lot of merge diverge issues with the trucks in the number 3 lane right up against the ramps. And especially as we go through the city of Reading, some of the tightness of those ramps, and we're trying to move those conflict points away. And this is being looked at basically being looked at other parts of the state, especially down the Central Valley on Highway 99, as they start their truck study on what a truck only lane may look like down on the 99 corridor down there in the valley. Yes, if things don't work in the future, we're going to have opportunities to be able to make modifications. We have to go through a process to do that. We also have to go through the process of looking at the full limits of the corridor. So right now, while we're only touching a small piece, we are coming with the follow-up looking at where does it really make sense to move the trucks over and move them back once we have a full 6-lane facility, basically from the county line up to Shasta Lake City, so that we can make those appropriate decisions where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. Obviously, we can't restrict trucks out of those other lanes because they will have those connection points with the other state highways and that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of a challenge there, is we just can't tell them you have to be in that number 1 lane. Talking to the trucking industry, we think there's a lot of support, and it's actually the trucking industry to start talking to us about, hey, if you get us over there, then a lot of these other issues go away, and it's just somebody needs to try it and take a look at it. So there's going to be opportunities. It may not be instantaneous, and there's going to be, as we go and operate it, we get it built, as we go and operate, we're going to have that flexibility to look at what works best. I don't know if that answered your question.
I just don't think it's gonna work.
You're allowed to think that.
You got truckers from all over the country who have to adjust. How would they possibly know this one little section a mile and a half in Northern California, you know, that I think they'll stay in the 1 and 2 lane. And a few local truckers that understand it will use it, but I think that's just all that it's going to do. And then small vehicles will want to use it, and then the question is, what kind of enforcement or what kind of ticketing, and what will happen? So it'll be interesting. It's just unfortunate that you know, we couldn't get this grant in a different manner that wasn't a dedicated truck lane.
And what is the legal way to pass a truck, one truck to pass another truck in that situation? If you get a truck on the inside lane there and the guy behind him wants to go faster, there, you know, you're gonna have to pass him on the right, apparently.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay, so like I said, what could go wrong?
Okay, this is an item we're suggesting input from Michael. Anybody else have any input?
I think there's just an informational depot put in Cottonwood. And Chris Kelstrom should lead that effort.
There should be a sign that says this way, traffic.
There won't be any rabbit buses in the way, so we're good.
I did have one comment based on what Odette said earlier on your proposed regional planning priorities. Down there on the plan to zero emission vehicles, you say, continue to plan for a gradual transition. I would like to see that be worded something like, continue to plan for a realistic transition.
Not forced transition.
In other words, it needs to be realistic because the federal mandate for EVs is going away.
Correct.
And Newsom is going to keep trying to push them all he can. So somewhere there's going to be a realistic balance between the two. And I'd like to have that statement reflect that.
We can do that. Glad to do so.
Yeah. Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I think I'm reversed. Just a reminder on each item, if we can also double check there are any public comments, just in case.
Okay. Yes. Well, since there was no public, nobody jumped up. We will move on. So we have received an update on the development North State Intercity Bus to Rail program.
And as Maddie comes up here, our goal for this is to kind of give you an update on where we're at with the project. It's mostly been a data and information gathering effort, as well as really getting an understanding of bus and rail passenger transportation across the entire North State super region area. And you talk to a lot of the operators and activities taking place. I know we have a joint presentation with Medi and the consultant who has been assisting us with the project. And they will identify for you kind of where we're at today, what we've learned, who are those number of the different folks who we've been having conversations with. And then also next steps, including our public engagement process for community input related to what's been found. So with that, I'll hand it over to Medi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about item number 12, that is the North State Intercity Bus Rate Plan. And to provide a background, I can say, as you may know, SRTA was awarded a Caltrans Strategic Partnership grant to develop a plan for enhancing intercity transit connections and also to meet the related community needs. And for that purpose, a contract with ACOM to help us to develop this plan was recommended but not approved during the February meeting. But the chair asked us to provide more information and to present that item at the next board meeting. And at the May special meeting, the board authorized the executive director to execute an agreement with ACOM to help us to develop this plan. But we had to revise our schedule, and based on the revised schedule, the draft will be ready in January, February, following community input from a workshop in January. And the final plan will be presented for approval at April meeting. And if I want to talk about the plan itself, I can say that the plan focuses on some key tasks, including data collection to have some ideas about the existing condition, stakeholder engagement, identifying potential hubs, and exploring the feasibility of rail and bus connections, and also exploring the possible regional governance structures. We had 2 technical advisory committee meetings, which were held in July and November, with participants from the North State counties and transit operators, Caltrans, San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, and also other related regional governments. We also conducted a public survey and received around 122 responses. And today we are going to review the results of this survey, in addition to explore the potential bus and rail routes, and also to talk about the possible regional governance structures. And with that, I want to invite Daniel from AECOM to start his presentation. Daniel, please.
Great. Thank you, Betty. And good morning, Chair and members of the board. Appreciate your time for presenting this to you. Next slide, please. Let's see. There we go. So just want to review, we are looking at, this study is looking at different hubs and routes to hubs from Shasta County. So, and these are destinations, hubs that we determined through our data collection process and seeing what made the most sense. So I'm going to summarize those real quickly. So again, travel to and from Shasta County to these different hubs. So the first one is out of state in Eugene. And we're looking at a bus service along the I-5 corridor, that's the Intercity bus. And then we're also looking at potential rail service via the current Amtrak long distance route along that corridor to Eugene from Shasta. Also to Chico would be a rail route as well, because we currently have a bus service that's working now that was recently instituted. And then we're also looking at the bus service from Shasta to Sacramento, which is building off the Salmon Runner proposal that's been studied previously. And then we're looking at a route to Reno via Susanville, and then a route to Eureka Arcata area via the SR 299 corridor. Those are the 5 that we're studying in detail in this plan. There's a 6th that's been identified through some of the stakeholder work that we've been doing. And so that's the Ukiah Clear Lake to Williams via the SR 20 route. We're going to mention that in the study as something for future study if their interest continues in that corridor. So how did we determine these? So based on the data collection, we looked at elements of demand, population, and employment, hub connectivity, and as well as key destinations such as colleges and universities, hospitals, sports and entertainment venues, as well as key markets related to tourism, recreation, and business trips, etc. Next slide. This slide kind of covers the stakeholder engagement process, which Mehdi covered pretty well just a minute ago. So I'm going to briefly just recap. We've had 2 advisory committee meetings already. We've had 1 questionnaire that covered Shasta County. We're having today's meeting for a plan update. We're also currently, as Mehdi mentioned, expanding the community questionnaire to surrounding counties, as the first one was really focused on Shasta, but there was a request for further input on that. And then we'll have a hybrid community meeting, virtual and in person, on January 16th. And we'll be coming back to you with another presentation in February to review the draft plan, and then we'll have a 30-day comment period late February to March. And then we'll look to see potential approval of the plan in April. Next slide, please. Just some quick, some of the results from the community questionnaire that was already completed. We wanted to get a sense of the existing travel frequencies to these 5 destinations and how the nature of that. And looking at the data from the questionnaire, Sacramento area ranked as the #1 place for monthly travel from Shasta, as well as Chico ranked #1 for weekly travel. So, and then there's a lot of other results, as you can see in this table, but I won't go through all those, but I think it's in your board packet if you want to look more detail at that one. Next slide, please.
Can I ask how that
data was gathered?
Yeah, this data in particular was gathered through the community questionnaire that was done online. And there was like a specific question asking folks. So it was directly from respondents themselves.
I guess my question is, when you say online, in what form? Like, how did we seek input is my like question. Like, where were we sharing, like,
Was it
share your
emailed out?
thoughts?
Yeah, was it emailed out? Is it just on the website and you have to find it?
Yeah, I believe it was, and I may ask Mehdi to help me on all the things that they did, but there was like a stakeholder list that we developed of interested
Okay.
parties, and it was sent out via email with a link to kind of like a Survey Monkey type tool that would,
Okay.
yeah, and we had,
Thank you.
sure.
Do you know how many people
I
to
want
send
to
out
add
to?
that, yeah, we use email for distribution and also we put it on our website. We have a dedicated page on our website for this project. We also put the link on that page. We also ask our regional partners to distribute that one in their websites and through the email. So, and also we have AIM consultant who is working with ACOMs. They also distribute it through their contacts.
Do you know how many emails were sent to individuals?
The individual emails.
Yeah.
This can be a question that I can ask from AIM consultant because they manage those individual emails, but the emails were not sent to the residents. They were sent to the stakeholders and also to the regional partners.
How many people responded?
122.
And again, we're looking at getting more responsive. So these are preliminary, but focused most relevantly on Shasta County, which the study is directly about. So.
Didn't make the cut.
Okay. So the next question, was there any other questions before I move on?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next item was the ranking of destinations that our respondents wanted to see improved bus or rail connections. So once again, Sacramento scored like the best on this particular question, followed kind of equally by the Eureka Arcata destination, as well as Eugene in the Southern Oregon area. And then that Chico was following that, and then with rounding out with Reno and Carson City as a destination. Next slide, please. The other thing is we looked at, if there was like significant bus improvements done in any of these corridors, what would be the likelihood of the respondent making that bus travel their primary mode to go to those destinations? So we had a ranking from 0, least likely, to 10, most likely. And so Sacramento was by far the highest destination for this, followed by Chico. And very close to Chico was also Eureka Arcata in Eugene and Southern Oregon for that. And then Reno, Carson City was quite lower than the rest of those. We had another smattering of other destinations that were just mentioned, but we didn't identify all those in this table here. Next slide. So just kind of some other general results from the various questions of the questionnaire. So in terms of leisure travel, we saw that Eureka Arcata kind of ranked #1 on that, and #2 is Eugene, Southern Oregon, and then followed by Reno, Carson City. So that's an interesting data point. And then Sacramento was top for work and healthcare visit type trips. And then Chico was top ranking for the education related travel. Also, respondents call for better schedules just in general, and they want more bus and rail options. Expanding services to neighboring counties is also a priority. So, and that's one reason we're expanding this survey, this questionnaire. And then one other interesting data point about the demographics is there was generally 40 and older were the main participants. So we got very light responses from the younger folks. So the older community age groups seem to be most interested in this particular type of intercity service, but obviously we want to look at that as we continue to
use TikTok.
Yeah, maybe reach out to different ways to reach the younger crowds in the future. So
Could have used Pony Express or something like that.
TikTok's may be gone in a few days, as I understand it, but so social media for sure, yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's kind of the questionnaire. I want to move on now to we really assess potential demand for the 5 different corridors. And I want to stress this is preliminary results. We are still engaged in working with SRTA staff to like verify what we have and also look at some other things as we continue to work on the study. But these are our initial findings, and so they're preliminary in nature. But so the evaluation criteria we used for assessing potential demand for each of the 5 corridors was connectivity in terms of passenger rail, intercity bus connections, and air travel, like airports and the types of flights that fly out of those types of things. And then also we looked at the general market assessment in terms of providing access to employment and business centers, Medicare facilities, medical care facilities, and higher education, as well as sports and entertainment and recreation venues. And then we also looked at historic, current ridership of existing transit services that run along those proposed routes that we're looking at. Just kind of get a sense of what's happening already. And then we also incorporated the results of the community questionnaire that we just reviewed. Next slide. So we did a kind of a ranking for the 5 corridors. Now we actually have 6 when you count. We have 2 for Eugene, 1 is bus and 1 is rail. So it's actually 6 corridors that we looked at. So preliminary connectivity assessment, again, looking at intercity rail and bus and air. We ranked those with the highest being 5 and the lowest being 1 for each of the corridors. And then we added them all together to get a sum. And based on the sum, we ranked each of the corridors for connectivity. So the number 1 is highlighted in the orange is Sacramento. And then just behind Sacramento for connectivity is Reno. And that makes sense. They're the 2 biggest cities, and bigger cities have more connectivity, generally speaking. Following that was Eugene, which is a mid-sized city. So that also makes sense. And then we had Reno, followed that with Chico and Arcata, Eureka, which were tied. Next slide. Looking at market assessment rankings, again, we had the same type of like 5 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. We did all those different categories that I discussed earlier, added them together. And once again, the Sacramento route was like the highest ranking one by far, actually, for a market, given just the size and the size of that city is by far the most in terms of the North State area. And then we have the following that close is Chico, and then we had Arcata, Eureka, and that was tied with Eugene, the bus route to Eugene. And then interestingly, Reno was quite low ranked in terms of market, and also the Amtrak route to Eugene, which is kind of a very different nature route with a different type of characteristic than the bus route of I-5. Next slide. So we took connectivity and assessment together, took the rankings, scores, and then we also added one more feature to kind of really understand the potential demand, and that is the travel times for each of these corridors. So for example, Reading to Chico is the highest rank for travel time because it's the shortest, 1 hour and 15-minute estimate on for rail. And then the slowest was the actual rail to Eugene. So that was like ranked low. So adding all those different, connectivity, market assessment, travel time together, we got the highest ranking corridor was Sacramento, and followed by Chico. And then we had Arcata, Eureka, and then tie between Eugene bus corridor and the Reno corridor. And so the worst ranking was the Amtrak corridor to Eugene. Was there a question? Yeah. All right, next slide, please. So that's our initial assessment of kind of like rankings, which, can lead to how do you prioritize, your investments. But now I want to kind of go over to the conceptual service planning and how we approach that. So we basically looked at, for costing purposes, which we're doing some rough order of magnitude costing as part of our study. We're looking at 2 daily round trips for all the corridors, but obviously that may be adjusted based on the demand that we're coming around to understanding better. But for costing purposes, we're going with 2 daily round trips for now. Essentially, we're also looking at opportunities and challenges for each of the corridors. So for the Reading Eugene bus corridor up I-5, it leverages that I-5 infrastructure. So you don't have to really build like a heavy infrastructure. which makes it relatively low cost and short implementation time compared to rail. Also, the challenges is it would be a multi-state participation, implementation process. Also securing funding, and I'll just say securing funding is a challenge for all of these. So I'll just say that once, and then just we can assume that it's always these kind of things, they're not just funding just sitting out for intercity bus or intercity rail. It's always a challenge to make that happen. So so the Reading to Eugene rail corridor, the opportunity there does leverage an existing passenger rail corridor, which is the long distance Coast Starlight route. However, the challenges are demand may be light, as we were just discussing, and it still involves multi-state participation. It involves the freight railroads getting their approval, which is always difficult, and you have a high cost and long implementation time. Next slide, please. Looking at Reading to Chico, now this would be a rail corridor, assuming rail gets to Chico as an extension of what's happening with the Valley Rail program. North Valley Rail coming to Chico, and this would be an extension of that up to Reading. And the opportunities here, it does leverage an existing passenger rail corridor, the same long distance Coast Starlight train. And also it provides high quality connections, plugging in the North State region into the state rail system. So that's an opportunity. However, again, you need approvals to implement additional service on freight railroads. So you still have a high cost and long implementation time, even though it's a shorter route than the other one to Eugene. Always a challenge to do rail. And then you have Reading Sacramento bus corridor. Again, as we just discussed, the high demand serving Sacramento and is there. And also you have the airport. It would serve the airport potentially. Again, it leverages the I-5 corridor infrastructure, serves numerous communities along the way, which is great. And also a relatively low cost and short implementation time compared to rail. But here again, it's the funding challenges primarily in terms of startup and ongoing operations. Next slide. So Reading to Reno bus opportunities that serve some key recreational destinations, as well as Reno. And again, it has that lower cost. It's bus, so it leverages road infrastructure. Does require multi-state as this gets into Nevada, so you have another multi-state situation here. Also, as I understand, there's some weather challenges at times in this corridor, so that can affect reliability. So that's the Reno corridor. And then finally, the Reading to Arcata Eureka bus corridor does serve key destinations, recreation, and other types of destinations. Again, it's bus, so you have that like shorter and lower implementation time and lower costs. Also, you have the ability to leverage existing operators in the corridor, such as RAB, Trinity Transit, Humboldt Transit Authority. The challenges, in addition to funding, is dead zones, potentially due to the terrain there and the technology for technology communication. And apparently there's also weather challenges in this corridor as well.
Well, you also have technology challenges on that one because, I mean, you establish these corridors and 5 years from now that we're going to require electric buses, you can get an electric bus on either one of these corridors.
That is definitely a challenge. That's a great point. Appreciate bringing that up. Next slide. I'm now going to hand it over to Jim Lightbody, my colleague at AECOM, and he'll go over some governance options we've developed.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, as part of this study, we've been exploring possible governance options that could help improve service coordination among the transit agencies and lines, and as well as help get support for new services to be implemented. I'm going to go through several of these options that we explored using examples that are successful in other areas, mostly on the West Coast. Next slide. Yeah, these are the options, so we can go to the next slide. First option is simple service coordination agreements, usually through a memorandum of understanding among several transit agencies. The purpose is primarily to coordinate services under some joint marketing and branding methods. A good example is the Northwest Connector in Oregon that serves the area along the Oregon coast and connects over to Portland. They have integrated their services and coordinated schedules using that Northwest Connector branding technique. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, thanks. If you're going to look at a specific corridor, which we had in the studies, having these different hubs, there's a potential to implement corridor improvements using very corridor-specific agreements that would be primarily managed by one transit agency with various agreements, cooperative agreements or MOUs with other agencies. An example would be the current service that RABA leads down to Chico, which was introduced recently. Next slide. Another example that's been successful and much higher level of service for a long time is the Highway 17 Express that runs between San Jose and Santa Cruz. Again, involves an MOU between multiple agencies to provide funding and to integrate with Amtrak service and other rail service. And it's largely led and substantially funded by Santa Cruz Metro, but it's been a very successful interagency service. In the future, the Salmon Runner service could also fit that model. Next slide. A more ambitious approach that's been used throughout California commonly is the creation of a regional transit service authority, usually through a joint powers agreement, sometimes involving state legislation. There are a number of these around the state. In this area, the San Joaquin JPA is a good example that I think you're probably familiar with, where the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission manages the service and provides rail and bus service with the San Joaquins and intercity bus connections to that. This option requires a fairly substantial investment by at least one agency to take the lead and potentially additional funding to expand the service. So next slide. An alternative to a regional agency would be for the state to take a bigger role in actually providing service and potentially increasing funding. And there are two good examples of this in Oregon and Washington, where both the state departments of transportation have established their own intercity bus program with multiple routes in the state that connect to Amtrak and other local transit services. And they have a dedicated section of the DOT that works on those services and provides supporting funding for federal dollars that they get. And then finally, next slide, please. When you get to interstate, a couple of our hubs corridors include interstate operation. There you probably need the State Department of Transportations to take the lead and coordinate services. And the best example of that is the Oregon and Washington agreements that operate the Amtrak Cascade service, which includes both the rail service that supplements the regular Amtrak service, but also provides bus service in those corridors to supplement the train service, and provides a pretty good level of service between Eugene and Seattle and Vancouver. So with that, I'll turn it back to Daniel.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, a question. And Mr. Enda, you might,
Daniel needs to.
You have a question to cover next?
No, I think.
oh, go ahead. Wait. Get this over with.
Daniel, are you there?
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm not, yeah, I didn't quite hear the question, sorry.
Okay,
I left my filter at home, Vanessa.
good.
You can continue, Daniel.
Sorry, say that again?
You may continue.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, great. So potential strategies, just kind of looking forward, the report will end up having a set of recommendations, but for now we're looking at just kind of strategies, getting, and want to get more input before we go into kind of any recommendations. So next slide, please. So just in general strategies, the idea is to continue regular meetings with the North State Super Region Transit Working Group. It's a great venue to kind of keep a tab on all these different ideas and corridors and see, and continue talking about them. So that makes sense to continue. Let's see, and then I think, could you go back one slide, please? Sorry, I have one more bullet there. In terms of rail, again, those are more longer term efforts, but there is an effort happening that Caltrans headquarters division of rail is now leading for the next 2 to 3 years for the Reading to Bakersfield corridor. It's part of the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor ID program. So they got some funding and they're going to look at different rail service plans, and that would include, Reading to Chico, which is, subject to this plan. So just wanted to mention that as a thing to keep tabs on and understand what's happening and maybe even participate. Next slide. In terms of the actual potential specific service strategies, I mean, given what we are kind of learning about the demand related to Sacramento, it may make sense to prioritize the Reading-Sacramento route. And there are already discussions happening with RABA and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which runs throughway buses as well as trains. So on approaches to that corridor and basically kind of implementing the Salmon Runner service that's been studied previously. Also leveraging the North State Express effort, which is basically a set of improvements that stakeholders in the region are looking at, near-term improvements at various corridors, and I'll show a map on the next slide. But a couple of corridors that we would focus on specifically for this study would be the Reading to Eureka, as well as the could you go back? Sorry, I should have put the map here. I made a mistake there. Also, that other corridor that we're just mentioning as part of the study, the Williams to Clearwater Ukiah route. That's also part of the North State Express. Also consider bus service coordination efforts and improvements to and from Siskiyou County. There's a lot of interest in that. Also prioritize access to Veterans Administration facilities as part of any intercity bus improvements. That's been a big theme through our study. Also requesting that Amtrak explore capacity improvements and also increasing reliability for the Coast Starlight. There's a lot of frustration out there about, delays and also poor timing and also not being able to actually book a seat, being said it's sold out a lot. So again, that's a hard one because you have to coordinate with a national Amtrak, but definitely worth a conversation with them on that. So then in terms of the longer term, explore extending North Valley Rail to Reading. Again, that's that would be part of that effort I just mentioned with Caltrans, and also working with SJJPA as well on that. Next slide, please. So and then in terms of governance strategy, kind of like following up on what Jim was just talking about, consider for the North State Express corridors that you see in the map to the right, and any kind of shorter near-term improvements that might be possible, consider utilizing service coordination agreements or MOUs for those. Now in the near to midterm, in terms of developing a governance framework, it'd probably be good to develop a governance framework with SRTA, RABA, and SJJ, San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority regarding the Salmon Runner. That's something that could be worked on in the near term quite quickly, actually, if that makes sense. And that would be also an interagency, that could be an interagency agreement or an MOU. And then in the mid to long term, in terms of the other bus routes and rail, again, as Jim, maybe it makes sense to look at reaching out to the state to see what level of involvement they might be willing to participate as you start crossing more jurisdictions and all that. It does help to have like kind of an overall coordinating entity, and the state might be a good option for that. So, and then finally, it might make sense to have a new agency with regional technical advisory support. That may also be at the state level. And then, of course, we need to look at funding sources, and that the picture on funding could change drastically with the new administration. So definitely want to keep tabs on how that's evolving. Next slide, please. And so that concludes my presentation. Sorry we had so many slides. I know it's always a lot to get through, but I'm going to pass it back to Mehdi for next steps and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And before I talk about the next steps, I want to mention that we also use our social media accounts and also our regional partner social media account to promote the link for the survey. And if I want to talk about the next steps, I can say that we will have a community workshop on January 16th to gather input from community before drafting the plan. And then the draft will be presented at February meeting following a public comment period starting from February 21st to March 21st. And then the final plan will be presented for approval at April meeting. And I want also to mention that we have a dedicated page for this project on our website where the public can submit their feedback. Thank you very much.
Can I request that when you have a time and location for that January 6th meeting that you let us know so that we can also publicly share that?
Yeah, sure. I think we already distributed the information about the time and location among our regional partners. And I will make sure that we also send it to you. At the time,
MySpace page.
Where is the location?
the location will be here, and it's a hybrid meeting, so the people can participate online or in person.
We'll make sure that a copy of the flyer gets into all the board members. So if you have other folks, or organizations you want to share it with, we'll make sure you get it. But it'll be an evening meeting. Try to make it most convenient for most people, and it will be hosted here on the 16th.
So my first question is for Mr. Endo. We have electric buses. So you have electric buses at Raba right now, don't you? Do you not?
We have 2.
Okay. And realistically, I don't want salt flats with a back wind and no heat or air on. Realistically, how far do they go with in 110-degree heat with the air conditioner on full time, or this weather here with heater on full time? What is the range?
Or John's doing it.
The van.
Not the van. I'm talking a bus.
The bus will do about 150 with everything fully. The current bus that we have.
It'll go 150 miles before it needs to be recharged.
Correct.
And then how long is the recharge to be able to come back?
Recharge would be about 30 to 45 minutes. The newer generation, to recognize our electric bus was purchased in 2019. The newer electric buses now, they can go, if you run it full AC, full passenger capacity, they're now about 220.
And that's
How much is that?
hills or fairly flat?
That's fairly flat.
Okay, because I'm looking at this and Mehdi, don't get me wrong, you did amazing work and you did fantastic. But we're doing all this work, we're going to invest all this money, and then our hands are going to be tied in 4 or 5 years of electric buses, and half these routes aren't going to be doable.
I think at the moment we have this opportunity to use the conventional buses.
Well, I know, and that's what you're going to establish the routes in, but then 5 years down the road, whenever CARB decides, okay, now it's all electric buses across the state,
I think that is not an option when we do not have any kind of feasible options for the
They can say
electric buses. But until we have the feasible options, we can use the conventional buses using the renewable diesels.
Okay, because I didn't get your name, I'm sorry. Dave, okay. Because Dave, his hands were tied, and I didn't hope my frustration, and it wasn't direct towards you in any way. His hands were tied in order to get 6 lanes, all the way through. He had to jump through all these hoops and play these games and say, okay, the trucks are going to go in the left lane, and then hopefully we'll be able to fix it down the road. Here, we're jumping all through all the hoops and setting this all up, and then our hands are going to be tied in a few years down the road.
Yeah, even in our ICT plan, we mentioned that until we have some kind of feasible options for electric buses, we need to use the conventional.
And they seem to be okay with that?
Yeah.
And that, I'll add to that. So, and that is one concern we've had from the start, even when the Innovative Clean Transit Rule, what we call ICT transit rule, was pushed out. One of the things that was included in there specifically was the fact that any agency, large or small, can go through and do a business analysis and look and also say, based upon the routes, the needs and everything else, we cannot identify, nor can we purchase in the timeframe requested the vehicles to meet the requirements from the EV transition. So therefore, we will continue to use these And as those vehicles become available, we will then reconsider if one, they can technically meet the mileage needs and all those other needs. And do we have the funds to be able to do that? And do we have the infrastructure available to do so? So there are a number of, in the ICT regulation, number of options to be able to go through. We have to review it every so often and go back and say, hey, here's the current listing. Here's a review and analysis. We're going to continue. We're not going to replace. We have to include that their defensive information each time, but that is available. And CARB does recognize that, because I know in talking with John and them doing research or looking at vehicles, you're talking any vehicles are several years out anyways to get them, assuming materials and the parts and all the stuff is there as well. So those are all things that we'll be able to say, look, as soon as we're going to even get any vehicles, if that's even the case, is going to be in 2029, there's going to be 2032. So we'll continue to use the conventional vehicles that we have until those available. And for certain routes, especially in our rural areas and mountain areas, until the vehicles are there, we'll continue to argue the case that says conventional vehicles will continue to have to be used until the manufacturers can develop a reliable vehicle that we're not worried about failing us, and we don't need to buy 2 or 3 of them to do a route. That's not cost effective either.
Because, I mean, when I toured Anderson High School a couple of years ago, I mean, the superintendent was telling me there that they didn't have to go to electric buses. But now he was telling me that they are so inefficient. And, thank you, John, because John's information was not what I had heard from him. But he was saying that they plug the buses in all night long. They have enough power to go pick up the kids and bring them to school, but they don't have enough charge time to charge them again to take the kids home. So they'd have to use a second bus if we were going electric. Now, that was a couple of years ago when he told me that. And I was like, so I'm looking at these routes going.
Technology has definitely evolved over the years. And I can also tell you in our ICT plan, we're also considering hydrogen for some of the longer distance routes.
Okay.
And
Well, I think that
we
is.
have a RFI out on the street right now where we're gathering information from the
When
marketplace.
San Francisco's buses went to hydrogen, didn't they?
They're demonstrating hydrogen. As well.
Okay. All right.
And on that, I think, so the technology is one side of it. The other main purpose of this study is, I think, timing wise, it is informative. For example, the state rail agency that's doing a study for this bigger, longer network and everything. The one thing that we've always had the challenge of for a number of years, including some information, that we've not had a significant amount of collaboration with all the different partners across the North State to actually give a realistic viewpoint to the state to say, here's where we're at today. Here's the challenges and needs that we have now. Here are some areas where we know based upon market, for example, Sacramento being definitely a huge destination place for a number of reasons, including medical, and continued needs that we identified through connecting the veterans facilities as well throughout the North State region and what's there. Identifying those and giving that information to state says, hey, here are some of the actual needs that we have, and here's a study that we've done that's actually put all that together. Please take this information and use that to inform the processes as the state moves forward with bus and passenger rail services. So I think that is one very key component about this study that we're doing going forward, is identifying those markets and needs and what are those opportunities. I also know in the conversation we had some partners, for example, it's really turned into some fruitful discussions between Rapid, Trinity Transit, and Humboldt to say, how do we deal with the corridor? Because our folks going across from here to Arcata to Reading and then getting other places. What are those needs? What are those gaps, technology and other things to identify to improve service so we have less dead time for riders on the routes going across, weather permitting and everything as well. And so that's had some fruitful conversations that we've not been able to have to talk about those needs and what are those costs, to share that with the state to say, here's what we need, here's what we need your assistance with. So that way the communication between the vehicles and drivers between the different routes can communicate. And so we can reduce and have greater efficiency. So I think we've had some good positive outcomes in the conversations with this study.
The age of who responds doesn't really tell me very much. I would want to know what bus riders are looking for. Is it bus riders, people without a car? Would they take a bus down to Sacramento? People that actually have a car, why would they go? I mean, if I'm going to go to Sacramento on a bus, it's probably to catch a plane. So I have a different need and I would use it for a different reason. But even if I had a medical thing, I would drive there. So you have people with cars, people without cars. Maybe the age would determine probably what they're going for. If they're younger, they're probably not going for medical, if you don't want to ask that specifically. But their age doesn't really tell me anything about what the need is. Plus the fact that we're sort of a hub. So I would think that a lot of people from Modoc or Siskiyou, Trinity, they may be coming up to us and then from us would take a bus down to Sacramento if they don't have a car. So if they're using other intercity transit or even Araba to get to Reading as a hub, then from or for wherever. So if you're trying to get, if you can get to Reading, then from Reading, you can get to Sacramento, you can get to Chico. I would want to know how many people do we think that we would pull that are using us now for air, but would they be willing to use us for a bus trip? And I didn't see any of that data.
Actually, to answer this question, I can say that we just summarized the main data in this presentation, but we had around 13 questions, and we also asked about their current modes of travel.
Yeah.
For to these destinations, and also we ask about the possibility of their willingness to change the travel mode to the bus or rail if we improve these options. So I can say that we have those kind of information.
I would love that type of information.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like also with 122 respondents, that's not a very good sampling.
There will be a complete memo about the results of this survey, and I think it will be completed soon, and we will share that in our project website. And in addition to that, we extended our survey, as I mentioned, to other countries to capture the demand that the other countries may have to come to Reading also. So that kind of data will be available soon.
And with 122 respondents for Shasta, I'm assuming this is Shasta County, that can't be a scientific sampling, like that can't be an accurate enough sampling enough to make these types of.
Yeah, for to have a scientific sampling, we need at least around 400 respondents.
Yeah.
If we consider the sampling error of 5%, we need at least 400 respondents, but we need to know that considering our limited budget and time and tight schedule that we have, that is not something possible for us at the moment.
Has Raba, have you got, John, not Raba, your name's not Raba, but John, do you guys ever send emails out? Do you have emails up? Because now you have an app, right? Do we have access to emails of our writers to be able to actually send surveys?
Yeah.
And ask these types of questions? Did we do that for this?
We did not, because we just actually started building that database since we just transitioned to VIA. So going forward, future surveys, we're asking each of the survey to do.
Because that seems like a good resource to just find out, like.
We did put flyers on all the Raba buses to encourage the ridership.
Right, but with 122 respondents, and mostly it looks like the people that work at the places where it was like.
Get into Christmas party.
Should have.
We may have to.
Miss that opportunity.
Our ridership also likes things manual, so we may have to also perhaps pass out paper surveys to them and give them an opportunity to drop them off in like an envelope from the.
That would be cool. It feels like we have, that's like shooting fish in a barrel sort of situation. We have like a group of people who we have all of it. We should have all of their data and they're sort of stuck on a bus. So something to do sounds fun. I'm just saying there's stuff if you want to do it manually. It's a fun sort of quiz. That would be really helpful. So we're not making a decision because you're doing all this work surrounding.
Our drivers can pass us the survey.
I think the issue is always the same issue we have is we can get buses, but nobody goes on them. So it would be great to have, that we offer something that people are going to use. And if they're not aware of it, or if they are aware of it, tailoring it to who we know for sure would actually use it. I know if there was a van or a bus to Sacramento, it is not consistent. It's used, people aren't using it as much. But they do use the rail, right, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever it is.
A lot.
Yeah, John's using. So it would be, yeah. So anyway, I think it'd be, I would, that's the kind of data I'd want. So if you have that, that's great for the next meeting.
Well, I think that we need to thank Daniel and Jim, but are there any public comments that we need to, anybody wants to ask that's here?
Amy and Michael, do we have anything, requests for comments online?
Oh, wait, I just saw a hand come up. I have Jerome Kirazi. Let's see.
Okay, can you bring them up?
Yep, 1 second. Jerome, go ahead. Okay, he's rejoining here so he can talk. Jerome, go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. My name is Jerome Kuriazi. I'm a planner with Humboldt Transit Authority, and I just wanted to just throw out our appreciation for the work that SRTA is doing on this regional plan and the cooperation that they've shown with including us and others along the North Coast in this process. And yeah, we're appreciative of the leadership that SRTA is taking on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. Do we have any other online?
I do not.
Okay. So it seems like the whole study has identified these different corridors, and we have a limited amount of people saying where they'd like to ride. But at this point, I don't see anything that would fill more than one van a year going to Eureka or somewhere like that. So we have a problem really of figuring out who is really going to ride these. I think the route to Sacramento has real potential because of the airport and the cost of parking down there. It would makes economic sense if there's a quick route to the airport. And maybe the one to Reno, but 7 hours on a train to Eugene is somebody's just going to have a real reason to go there.
I think it was 9.5, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
9.5.
Yeah. So I think it's good that we're looking at this and looking at potential hubs and routes, but we have a long way to go to figure out who and the real demand that is going to be generated for these routes.
Well, that, and if Eugene, if Reno, if to the coast, if we all do it together to make Reading the hub to where you catch it to Sacramento from there, then I think that coming together, that could be plausible, you know what I mean? Because we are all kind of sharing the costs for that. It's just, I would want to know.
Yeah, it'd make more
sense
maybe from Alturas and some of the
Also that.
remote areas, because Reno has their own flights and they're not going to come through Reading and
So
go
do
to
we.
Sacramento.
We have an airport.
Yeah.
Those were my thoughts,
And
Vanessa.
how are the flights to Denver going?
Great, we'll be
They're going.
starting in May. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Would you like us to book you a ticket?
You can book your ticket.
I am ready to do that.
Guys, we're all gonna be in prison.
Not until you had to speak up.
Give us more money.
Okay, so
Stay on task.
any other comments or thoughts? Yes.
Is the goal to select one route, or is the goal to kind of study multiple routes and possibly pick like 2 or 3 essentially?
The goal is to analyze the different roads that we have for different hubs. And then the goal is to propose some kind of short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans for each of those roads. So I can say, for example, for short-term, we may focus on just one road, and for mid-term for more routes, and for the long-term for all of them. So the plan is to consider different timeline for that. Roads that we are going to promote.
Not to eliminate anything, but to just help with prioritization and how you want to invest in the future and the time frame, as Mehdi was saying, in terms of phasing.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I just feel like part of, and I appreciate you asking that question, because when you talk about what defining success is, and we're talking about these routes, I think the most important thing is to see what people are needing and wanting. I mean, we're saying, well, we don't have a lot of respondents, but we're going to start making these routes. And it's like, wait a minute, like the focus should be like, how can we get, your number was 400. I was guessing it was going to be somewhere between 600 and 700, but 400 is the number.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be more too.
Yeah.
But I'll
I
take
mean,
400.
Yeah, I'll take 400, and I'll take, 200. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff's got to be paused and everyone's got to say, all right, we're going to get a phone book out. We can find a couple of those. We're going to divide up and we're just going to start calling. And you're going to get hung up on probably 85 times. But ask people, like, why are we putting so much time and energy into creating stuff without knowing what people want?
Are you making a motion for that?
So,
You gotta make those calls.
Yeah, actually,
Well, I mean, but whoever does it, I mean, you could go door to door. I mean, this isn't rocket science of getting 400 people to respond.
Maybe we should make a motion to have you and Mary Ricker spend 6 hours making phone calls.
That's a great idea.
to that response, I
Low
agree.
blow, Kelstrom. low blow.
One of the things that we have is definitely getting input is always a challenge, and I experienced that years ago when we were early exploring the whole Sunday service and going on the rides, like even just getting people to commit when you're on the bus and trying to be very approachable and say, hey, I've got a survey, I've got it in a hard copy format, and I have it also on a tablet. Be happy to get your input. Here's what our goal is. Even then, getting enough surveys at the time, I think maybe we got close to 300 or something at the
I mean,
Well, I mean, we
The
can
mark-
utilize this app where we
Yes,
have
we
their
can.
emails now, which if it's by email, if you're already on your device, you could have the Chamber of Commerce. They do surveys all the time and they get enough respondents to have it.
And I think also the workshop, we can also include elements of the survey as well to be able to have that as part of the workshop that we do.
Put some like
Sure, but I mean-
third and fourth graders up by the, Salvation Army kettlebell ringers and just ask, hey, why are you donating that money?
Yeah, and you fly out of Sacramento quite a bit. If there was a bus going back and forth, would you use it?
No, but also that's why there's been 2 or 3
But if there was a
companies.
flight, I'd take it.
That's why there's been 2 or 3 companies that have
That's coming
tried
on.
to actually, they've tried to go. I think Eric Vickery was the last one. Maybe
Yeah.
10 years
We
ago.
don't have to make a profit like they do.
Yeah. Well, but
We're trying not to.
But that's the thing is it's a completely backwards model of saying, hey, we're going to solve the problem, but we don't even know what the question we're asking is.
By the way, to clarify my comment, Kevin made a motion last year to have me and Mary sit in a park for 6 hours and take surveys from Palisado people. So that was what I said.
That's just Kelstrom's slogan. I would say seriously, hey, I know. We should have made the motion while Aaron was gone, but we could have someone at Dutch Brothers get 400 responses about that. Like, there's a lot of traffic there. I mean,
John
I
knows
think
this.
that has to be the focus, man. Is getting the number of whatever the scientific study was. Tanessa and I both thought it was 600 or 700. If it's 400, get that data. Then let's make a determination of what success looks like by what
We've
people
got,
are
yeah, because we don't
Okay.
have we don't have people in the
Patrick's
bus
next.
here in Reading.
I believe, and John, you know this, at least with RABA, our ridership over the last decade has gone down. Our budget has doubled. So we're spending more money and ridership's gone down. What makes us think that this would be a success, given those trends?
So, yeah, those are great points as well, and I share some of those same concerns about what we see in terms of ridership and where we're seeing returns or not.
I will say that here's.
Daniel, I will respond, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. My apologies.
I would say when we look at success, the goal of this is to get information, understand what our community needs are and where they want to go. I would say a number of things with rail, that is going to be super long term, and it's probably not even realistic anytime soon to even talk about, other than say, hey, we looked at it. This is the challenges. I think the one main thing I when we talk about rail is Amtrak, we need them to do a better job, is what I think we're going to find out of this, and we understand the community's input. When it's bus, on the bus side, a lot of it's coordination. We have a lot of operators already out there. So how can they be more efficient, maybe meet needs? Where are there opportunities for collaboration and identifying what those needs are, where people need to go? That is the hardest part is, during an unmet transit needs process, we hear a number of different needs that come up, but having the demand to be able to do it, that it makes even financially sense for us to be able to do so because of the performance metrics that you have to perform on any type of a bus route is a key component of that. That is always something that transit agencies are dealing with. So I see success here as being to have a study that allows us to have a better idea, hopefully, of the environment that we're in, realize what's realistic, especially in the short or midterm, what are definitely way out there long-term things, be able to take this and provide it to the state that says, hey, we finally at least have a study that's looked at things across Shasta County and the North State. Here's a more realistic viewpoint of where those things are at. And please take this because in the past, we've not gotten much response from you about what did you do in our region? What studies did you do? How did you actually come to those results about certain routes? And say, here's at least a better picture of what we think is realistic today And then maybe 10 years from now, we gotta have another conversation. And I think that is one of those things where it's a thing that you continue to look at because our communities always change over time. So
we could all be dead from the bird flu tomorrow anyway, so, you know.
I agree completely, but I think we need more respondents to know what that is. To the point that some of us sit on the RAVA board and we know that ridership is not where it needs to be, and we're subsidizing empty buses. So now we're moving to vans. So is this something that needs a van? Is it something that needs a bus? Like, I would just want, I think you actually need a real sampling of the community to know exactly what the need is and who's likely. If you had a plane versus a bus, would you do the plane, not the bus? Do you need a van that is more on demand? So if they get, you know, the ridership, then it's available. If not, and can we coordinate with RABA to use a van if for some reason we got the demand for, you know, a bus trip only on Fridays and Sundays or something to that effect? Like, why don't we tailor it to the response that we get and then have some options from the response? But 122 to me is just not enough of a response to really know what the demand actually is.
Yeah. And I think to that, we'll work with Daniel and their team to see how we can enhance that and improve that, get response. We do have the one other survey that's out right now. I think one thing we'll look at talking about is maybe extending it. So it's, you'll be on just this month. So we have give us more time to get more responses. And then we'll come back to you with.
What was the time frame of getting 122?
It was I think it was a 3 week.
I believe it was about 45 days, right? 90 weeks. Extended it a little bit. It started at 30 and I think we extended it maybe to 45 days. My apologies. We don't have AIM on the call today, but I believe that's right.
It's like 3 to 4. It's like 2 1/4.
Yeah. So we'll report back to you in February and kind of where we're at, what we've learned.
Can I add something, John?
Mhm.
Actually, to address your comment, I want to say that to have that kind of marketing assessment study, we need some kind of more detailed research, because it's not just about why people want to use the bus or not. They may have we may have some kind of other effective factors, for example, psychological factors or social norms factors that can affect the travel mode choice. And for that purpose, I think we need some kind of detailed studies that can be out of the scope of this study. Because this study the purpose of this study is just to cover some kind of high-level information that can be shared with our regional partners and the state to have some ideas about the initial needs, the potential hubs, and the potential routes. And absolutely, for implementation plan, we need to have that kind of study that needs its special funding, its special requirements, and I think it will be to somehow out of the scope of this current high-level study.
So, I mean, high level, the question is, if you needed to take the bus, where would you go? Would you go to Sacramento? You know, give that option. I'm not asking for a psychological test I literally am just saying this exact questions need to go to more people and we need more of a response. If nobody asked me, I'm on this board, I never saw it. I never got the opportunity to do this survey. And I don't go, I'm on the board and I don't go to the website. I don't think the general public is going to the website looking for possible, surveys to fill out. So I don't understand why it would need to be at any higher or psychological level. If somebody asked me, hey, if there was a bus to Sacramento, would you take it for some flights? The answer is yes, I would, maybe twice a year. But I would answer that question. And to what hub would I want to take it out of? Well, I live here, so I would say.
To answer to why you do not use bus.
Yeah.
So
I don't care why I don't use a bus. I just want to know if I would use a bus. I don't want to know why I don't. We're not determining that. We're determining.
If we want to promote those kind of sustainable travel options, we need to know why.
So Annette, I think we've had.
No, you had 122 people. So you're saying that the survey that you did not address if they would use a bus? We're doing a planning document and we surveyed people if they would use a bus to Sacramento, but it's not about if they would use the bus to Sacramento?
No. I mean, if we want to have a study to actually have the implementation plan. We need to have some kind of implementation plan to encourage people to use the sustainable travel options. And for that purpose, we need to know why they do not choose bus or.
Sure, but I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for this specific one that you guys just did. You only got 122 responses to determine if you're going to have rail or bus take you to where, right? So you had to have asked that question. Where would you take the bus or where would you take,
You're
right?
saying
To
you
these,
just want to hear.
I want
more
400 people. I want to
Okay.
hear what 400 people have
We
to
could
say.
literally
No,
tonight,
22.
because our meeting will have probably 200 people. We could put a QR code up on our screen. People with their cell phone could scan that and answer a survey within a minute. What's that?
I said that's a great idea. It's free.
Well, yeah, and I just asked Sean, I mean, do we have a link available? Because Patrick, we'll just do that. Like I'll just do my board report. I could put a thing up on the screen and say, hey, get this out, take this,
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah, we had that option and we had the QR code.
Well, no, but do we
Can
still
we
have
still
that?
do it? And can Rob
Daniel, can you
send
respond
it
to
out?
that? Do you know without Gladys here?
Was that to Daniel?
All right, sometimes I have a hard time hearing. My apologies. What was that again?
Is it possible to quickly bring back the survey that we had and make it live?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
I don't see why not.
So just give me a QR code.
And-
John, can you send it to the people that we have emails for
Yes,
that ride the bus?
yes.
Yep. We'll work with Daniel and our team and we'll get you something here.
If I
I'll send you
get
an
a
email.
QR, our meeting's at 5:30, as long as I get it by like 4:30, we'll
I'll
put it
send
up on
you
the
an
screen.
And we don't
let
want
people-
to know anything psychological about anybody that goes to the board of supervisor
That's
meetings
right.
or that rides. I don't want to know. I
We'll put it
don't
up,
wanna
we'll put
know.
it up early in the meeting. You'll get a better response. Yeah.
Okay, Mealy, I think you've received some good input. I think Sean's summary was good. I think your questions on sampling is good. And looking forward, this is really only going to start with a van and maybe even a van on demand going to these locations. So there's a lot more for you to figure out. So we appreciate the presentation. And we'll see you again in February.
You won't see Mehdi again.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas and Happy New
From
Year.
Caltrans.
The best of luck in Caltrans.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we are moving ahead to item number 13 to approve a social service transportation advisory council.
Yes. Good morning, board members. I am going to give a brief presentation. We are looking to approve the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council appointments, or SSTAC. This happens every 3 years, and as a recipient of Transportation Development Act funds, or TDA funds, the TDA statute requires that SRTA have a SSTAC to inform and advocate for the needs of elderly, disabled, and transit-dependent populations. The SSTAC serves as an advisory capacity to the SRTA Board of Directors, like on the unmet transit needs. The term for all SSTAC members currently serving expires at the end of this year. Current members willing to continue their service, as well as new members, must be appointed to new 3-year terms. It is recommended that the Board of Directors appoint the 13 representatives to the SSTAC for 3-year terms from January 1st of next year to December 31st of 2027. The 13 representatives are listed in attachment B. The second recommendation is to authorize the executive director to make modifications to the appointed positions as needed. And the third recommendation is to authorize the executive director to appoint new applicants to vacant positions during the 3-year term, consistent with the SSTAC bylaws. Do you have any questions?
You have any questions?
John, you still up for this?
Like you're Make a motion to approve staff recommendation. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, it was moved by Aaron and seconded by, was it Deb?
Yep.
Yes. So
Nothing online?
Patrick has a comment.
No,
Oh, public comment.
Same thing.
Same thing.
no, soon to be.
Seeing no public comment. So Amy?
She's muted, but I heard her stand up.
She said, we can just.
Got it, thank you.
Just call for vote, Chief.
Okay.
You don't need.
All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. We are now on item 14, Jessica Carlson, approved adding local government investment pools.
Thank you, Karen. As Jessica gets this ready for presentation, I just wanted to mention that this effort started with initial inquiry by one local government investment program contact, asking us if we'd be interested in the program. That was sent to Jessica, follow-up. Jessica and I looked at it, and then it set a series of conversations with us, and then also then meetings with fiscal policy. So because to date, the SRTA's investment of funds that the agency must administer on behalf of the region have been primarily in bank money market accounts that provide a nominal return of interest. Our initial inquiry led to a full review and discussion about how local government investment programs, or LGIPs, could become part of SRTA's investment strategy while holding on to our investment values of ensuring safety of principal, having sufficient liquidity for payments, and gaining a reasonable rate of return on invested funds. The resulting discussions with fiscal policy committee members have resulted in effort and set of recommendations for consideration this morning that we think will provide great value to our city and county members. And we look forward to input and direction on this item. And as I've tried to give Jessica,
I'm sorry.
I hand it over to her to present on this item.
There you go, okay. Chair, if it pleases you, do you want to offer a break to anybody? We've been here for almost 2 hours. I just want to.
Well, this is our last item.
It is.
So let's.
You want to power through?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So item 14, we're going to talk about local government investment pools, and then adding those to SRTA's investment portfolio, and also a few subsequent updates to our financial policies in order to make that happen. I have presented to the Fiscal and Policy Committee 3 times as we initially offered LGIPs as an option. I'm going to be calling them LGIPs for this presentation. I've never heard anybody say this acronym out loud, so that's what I call it. But anyway, so we presented LGIPs back in September to the Fiscal and Policy Committee. Member Audette is the only remaining member of that committee now. But she has been instrumental in getting us where we are. And we followed up with 2 subsequent committees after that, which resulted in our 100-page packet that we provided to you. I didn't realize it was that long, but it feels like it's been 100 pages of research. So I'm going to try and get through this quickly. And I'll stop at certain spots to make sure you have time for any clarifying questions. This is the first time the board has seen this item. So I have 2 recommendations after receiving this report. One is to approve the inclusion of what I'm calling the statement of investment to SRTA's financial and accounting policies, which would allow these LGIPs to be an investment option. This would be a supplement to our policies, will be integrated at a future date that we would then present to you at a future board meeting to make sure that those integrations comply with what you're looking for in intention. And also, if you decide to exercise the options that I will present later, we would authorize the executive director to submit any required documents to enroll in the LGIPs that we decide and invest those regional funds that we have. So here's our little outline. We're going to go over our current investment policy, how these LGIPs fit into that, what significant rules that LGIPs have to comply with California law. 3 California LGIPs we did for research, the investment instruments or securities that we are allowed to invest in and what those limits are for the portfolios. 2 of the 3 LGIPs, we are going to go through their portfolio breakdowns and compare them side by side. I'm going to talk to you about the statement of investment and how those changes are going to be incorporated into our current policy, and then 2 proposed options to invest the funds that we currently have. So SRTA's current investment policy has 3 primary objectives. That is the safety of the principal of the funds that we have been charged to administrate, liquidity of those funds to be able to distribute them to people and jurisdictions, sub-recipients and claimants that need to use them, This is attachment F, by the way. You have the entire current investment policy as your last attachment in your packet. And then thirdly, the return that you receive by holding on to those funds in given investment options that you have. Currently, SRTA keeps all of our funds in commercial bank. So this would be our first investment opportunity. And that is why this had to take significant consideration to be able to make this jump. We do invest in the county pool for our Transportation Development Act funds. That is a law requirement that we keep those funds with the county as the custodian. They have certain investment policy that they follow. We are subject to those rules by having those funds held with the county. How do LGIPs fit into our current policy? They have certain components to LGIPs. Again, these are just parts that I'm emphasizing so that you can see how they fit into our current policy. Safety of principal, we're talking about Standard & Poor's, which is a national credit rating agency. AAA-M for all three of the California LGIPs we're going to be comparing, which is the highest score you can get. The net asset value, which was discussed in depth in, I believe, the October staff report, has to do with what does your principal dollar, what is the average value of that as it's being invested, and it goes up and down. A NAV of $1 means the dollar you put in will stay $1. That is kind of, these are not guaranteed funds, they're not insured funds. All invested funds need to be collateralized, which I went over in other meetings, but this NAV rating is going to be that security that you have that your dollar will remain $1 in value wherever it's going. And then the 60-day weighted average maturity has to do with the mortgages and loans that are part of the securities that you're investing in. How long are the agreements that those have to return the funds that were borrowed with the interest that has been charged to that loan? And so these LGIPs are going to have an average about 60 days, give or take. So the lower weighted average maturity that you have, the better the investment, because you're going to realize those gains from your principal in a quicker cycle, if that makes sense. Liquidity, all three of these, you can request a transfer of your funds out and into your commercial bank account to be able to distribute to your claimants within 1 business day. You request on Tuesday, the money is in your account on Wednesday. You request on Friday, it's there on Monday. You request before a holiday, next business day after the holiday. So the liquidity is definitely there. Return, you're going to see an average of about 5%. But of course, as we realized on Wednesday, when they dropped the federal interest rate down 25 basis points, this is going to drop as well. But know that those federal interest rates impact the entirety of the investment options that public funds have. Federal Reserve goes down, LAIF goes down, our 5-star bank, commercial bank rates go down, and so do these LGIPs. So what I'm looking at here is that your LGIPs are going to consistently have 80 to 90 basis points above in returns to their participants than the local agency investment fund, which is California State's portfolio that they've built to do state fund investment. And subsequently, our commercial bank, 5-star bank, has a business strategy that all their public funds would have a rate of return that is equal to that LAIF rate. So ultimately, if we were to invest in an LGIP, we would consistently see 80 to 90 basis points greater return on our funds in excess of where we have them now at a commercial bank. Okay, so let's take a break there because I know I talk fast. So any questions right now?
Enron doesn't have anything to do with this, does it?
That wasn't part of my research. I have to get back to you. Please send me an email and I'll follow up. Moving forward. Okay. So
currently, all these are just in a bank gaining practically zero.
all of SRTA's funds, yeah, 0 to base rate. So we have a commercial bank, 5-star bank, that we have a good portion of our funds in now that are the business strategy of Five Star is to have public market funds be matched with the LAIF rate. But at our other commercial bank, we are making 0.01% per month.
That's not much.
No. So this isn't the bank, so this has some risk.
Yeah, this.
And what is the total funds that we're talking about?
We're gonna get into that in a few slides, but we are looking to invest somewhere around 20 million. But I'll explain that in detail in a minute. Anything else? Okay, so these three LGIPs are governed by a joint powers agreement, JPAs. You guys are familiar with these. And just so you know, the California law 6509.7 says that they're allowed to come together, pool their funds together, and invest those funds as a group and realize the same investing power as larger agencies that would otherwise be able to do that. Small agencies like us with our measly 20 million, not getting very far from that. So we come together in these LGIPs and jointly exercise the power of our investment pool. Okay, so here's our three California LGIPs. We looked at California Class, which is fairly new. CAMP, which City of Reading invests in. I know that they're a participant there. And then CalTrust was a third one that came up when I asked what the different California LGIPs are. So I'm sorry, this is slide number 9, but it's also, I believe, attachment E, if I'm not mistaken. Attachment, yeah. Going, yep. I just made it look pretty, sorry. Okay, so CalTrust is the third one. We're going to be comparing Class and Camp today in our portfolio breakdown, but let's go over these three real quick because they have a few differences that I want to point out. Inception date is number 1. Class formed its JPA 2 years ago. Camp has been around since the 80s. They actually helped form the first LGIP. And then CalTrust was established in 2003. Oops, sorry, jumping ahead. Your weighted average maturity, like I said, is around 60 days. Your investment advisor is different for each of these LGIPs. And I just want to pause here just for a moment to let you know that Public Trust Advisors, which is for Class, has been investing public funds since 2011. They currently manage $76.4 billion in LGIP assets alone. And 1,140 new LGIPs began using Public Trust Advisors as an investment advisor in 2023. PFM Asset Management, again, started in 1981. It helped invest the first LGIPs funds, and in 2021 was acquired by US Bank. So it is currently being managed by US Bank Corp Asset Management. And when that merger happened, they acquired $407 billion of assets that are under management. So we're going to focus on these two, continuing on with the differences. Investment advisors have to meet these 3 requirements for LGIPs. They have to be registered with the SEC. They have to have 5 or more experience investing the type of securities that the local agencies are allowed to invest. U.S. local agencies, state and other treasury notes, bills, bonds, etc. And their assets have to be greater than 500 million. So all 3 of these meet those requirements. Just in the LGIPs alone. So we're back to looking at the LGIP itself. Class has $1.5 billion in assets that they're trading, investing, 1.7 for Camp, and 4.2 billion CalTrust. So I'm going to cut it down to Class and Camp for various reasons and research that I've done on specifically the investment advisors. We are going to drop just down to the 2. Let's not bite off more than we can chew. Any questions about this graph? I'm sorry?
I like to wrap.
Oh, good.
I mean, most of the stats there are the same with the exception of the WAM, is that correct?
The WAM, yeah. So again, the class is less than 60 days, and then you have somewhere in between. So it's about an average of 60 for all three of them.
And so, but you cut out CalTrust, but they have more invested, twice as much as any of the others. Why eliminate that?
So they changed to State Street as their investment advisor only 2 years ago. And so
So the lowest yield.
so yes, so that's a good point too. So a little bit of a lower yield. The investment advisor of State Street has the preliminary research that I did does not have the same reputation as the other two investment advisors. And then the participants, et cetera, everything else kind of remains the same.
So they don't have the reputation, but they have more assets.
They do.
State Street.
Yeah.
Well, what sort of things do any of them invest in?
I'm gonna take the two on the left and I'm gonna do a portfolio breakdown and I'll show you what that is. If you are interested, Member Jones, in me looking further into CalTrust, I can do that.
No, I don't know any of them.
Okay, and again,
Just, it's not Enron, that's all.
on the most surface level, class approached me. It was a previous relationship that I had with a representative from Five Star Bank, which got me into this whole thing. And then Camp is currently invested in the city of Reading. So I'm trying to stick to this at home. And again, I don't want to dive everything in at once when we still need to start this process for the first time and monitor performance, et
Is there
cetera.
any different risk with any of the three?
So risk comes down, yes, I'll get to that too. We have various risk mitigation strategies which are going to be implemented in the statement of investment that we're going to be hopefully including into our finance policy. But any investment is going to have the risk of risk, yeah. But basically, investments are collateralized by US Treasuries. They again have that NAV rating of $1, which has only been broken twice in US history. If you see next to the names, there's class prime fund.
So back up a
Go
little.
ahead.
So you said there was a guarantee of $1, but then you said it
Sorry,
broke.
not guaranteed. The net asset value is an average of the security of your principal that you've invested.
With any of these, how much money would SRTA make roughly, just as an average, with a $20 million investment? How much are we talking?
That's a really good question. In my staff report, I believe it was October, we did our RSVP program, which was
That's 18,000 a month.
it averages about 4.5 million. And then you could just multiply on top of that. But we have 20 million in assets right now. So a 5% yield on that on a daily basis, I would have to get to you on a specific number. But I did do a couple illustrations in that October staff report as well. Let me get you to the page.
So for context, City of Reading uses CAN and they did 4 million last year.
And then I can just.
And your income from that was what?
4 million.
So this is our RSVP funds, and you'll see a monthly breakdown. So on attachment B of item 14, page 19 of 22 illustrates what I'm talking about, where I did a sample of regional surface transportation funds and potential earnings we could have had from our daily balances last year. And Five Star Bank gave us 160,000. And if we would have invested in California Class, which is the one on the far left in that prime fund, we projected about 230,000 in returns. And that does not include the compound of interest plus your principal in the next month, plus your interest in the next month and the next month. So it would potentially be even higher. So it was a 44% increase in returns given last year. All right. So I'll breeze through this really fast. There's various types of securities you guys are probably familiar with, certificates of deposit, commercial papers like business loans, et cetera. And there are code limits that the California law has established for public funds. So they cannot go past this. So when we compare, again, class to camp, I cut out trust, but I can figure out what that is if you are interested, Member Jones. I put these side by side, and this addresses your risk question and Chair Watkins, your portfolio breakdown, what they're investing in. So what I did here for help is I will circle the two corresponding investment types, investment instruments. And you can see how, as we go through each of the different investment types, that there is a different proportion in each portfolio. So money market funds, et cetera. Now, supernaturals are foreign investments. So a portfolio can have up to 30% in foreign investments. Cash has none, and CAMP has 1%. So that's just difference that one has and the other one does not.
Find it interesting, we get federal money and then we're going to give it back to the federal government.
The government agency.
And we're gonna make some money on top of that, that's.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So, good thing again about the investment advisors and joining these pools is someone like me who doesn't have a dollar to invest. I can trust them to do this because of the legal requirements that they need to make. And I can put my money in their pool and follow the LGIPs policy, and I don't have to be a pro at all this stuff. Why did they choose to invest 1%? Well, that has to do with the board. You want to be a member and influence that portfolio, you can do that. It's just not within my wheelhouse. So. Okay, so statement of investment. So this is important about the statement of investment. I felt like our current investment policy, which is attachment F at the end of your packet, was a little skeletal. It did cover all these things. And in theory, it included investing in LGIPs. The board had to approve every investment security that we were going to use, which is why we initially brought class up to the Fiscal and Policy Committee, but it just wasn't explicit. So there are a few explicit things that I want to add in. One is from attachment D, page 3, it specifically mentions special investment pools. This would include the county investment pool. It would include LAIF. It would include LGIPs. And just to have that explicitly in our statement so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every few years, that would be something I'd suggest adding in. And then the next page on page 4 is this prudent investor rule, which I really appreciate a lot, which explicitly states that the way you're supposed to conduct yourself as an agency agent, investing public funds, is to do it with due diligence and to be prudent about it. That a normal, reasonable person in the same position as you would make the same decisions. So you're not going to let your personal influence or business practices influence what you're doing with public funds, and that this is going to make sense and it's going to be something that you're going to take great care in doing. I really appreciated this prudent investor rule. So I wanted to add that in, which is on page 4. And then lastly, because of significant concerns that came up multiple times from the Fiscal and Policy Committee, we are adding in explicit internal controls and reporting. So page 6 refers to how me as the CFO is going to report to the executive director on a regular basis with monthly performance reports to him and different kinds of reconciliations. He's going to come up with his own internal controls to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and what my team is doing. And then page 10 is, before I move on, page 6 also includes that you as the board can call an independent audit of our investment practices anytime that you feel it's fit. So we can bring someone in here, make sure we're following all the laws, make sure we're being prudent and doing what we need to do. And then 10 also says that, hey, for this first year, while we're trying something out, I'm going to bring you a performance report to every board meeting for the first year. Keep in mind, there's already the end of December, holidays, et cetera. If we decide to move forward with LGIPs, we have to first fill in the required paperwork, transfer the funds, let those funds perform, before I could then provide a performance report to you. So we're looking at maybe April, hopefully, to be able to do that, or June. Okay, so any questions? One more time.
And as these performance for what will the money, is it specifically going to be used for anything specific or?
Yes, so the funds are required to be used for the eligible activities that have been assigned to that project. So if we are investing CTSA funds, they have to be used with CTSA activities. And the great thing about all these LGIPs, under your SRTA account, you could have as many sub-accounts as you want for no extra cost. So I am allowed to split all these different types of funds into separate accounts so that we can track the interest that's earned on all those things. And then so each project and the project rules will determine how that interest earned will be used on future projects. Good. Okay, so here's my proposal. We have a number of funds. I split them into 3 groups. Operating funds, high activity, move a lot. I don't want to invest these funds. I want them to be completely liquid. I want them to stay in the bank. I want to be able to move them out monthly and sometimes more than that without having to do transfers back and forth in and out of the investment account. It adds an administrative burden I don't think is necessary. Advanced grant funds, just like I said, grants, funds that we have received in advance of the activities being completed. Outside of the state of good repair and the low carbon transit operations program, or LCTOP as we know it, I want to invest these advanced grant funds. We know in advance when activity is going to be happening. We know in advance when reimbursement is going to be requested. We have plenty of time with that 1-day liquidity to be able to pay the claimants on a reasonable time frame. SGR and LCTOP funds are asked upon almost monthly, if not more than that. And so again, I want to treat those like operating funds, even though they're advanced grant funds. I want to keep the ability to write them checks whenever they ask for it. Okay. And then thirdly, we have agency reserves. We have a number of accounts that SRTA holds with our name on it that for building improvements, let's say, planning that when the cash flow is low. We have the Regional Surface Transportation Program, which I did the illustration on. Jurisdictions ask for reimbursement on those funds about once a year. So you're talking about 4 or 5 transactions a year on the RSTP funds. I want to definitely invest those. That's $4.5 million on average that sits there all year long in give or take $2 million. So for your 2 options I provided, you can decide what how you want to whether join the LGIPs or not, how many, etc. But I just want to give you a couple illustrations. My favorite one is option 1. Take all of those 2 groups at the end, advanced grant funds and agency reserves, put them into 2 different LGIPs. I want to take advantage of that portfolio diversity, those different proportions that those portfolios invest in. And I want to keep my funds and at that lower risk. Diversity, greater diversity always equals lower risk. No, always is a horrible to use for investment. Okay, no guarantees, but the idea is higher diversity, lower risk. Class and camp, I'm very curious about. I would love to be able to monitor their performance over a period of 6 months to a year. And so I would love to invest in both of them and to see how they perform side by side. So if ultimately we want to just have one, then, or one significantly outperforms another for whatever reason, they're more responsive or something for their participants, it would be nice to be able to monitor them both. The second option is to be more conservative and only invest SRTA's reserves for a period of time and perhaps only do that in one LGIP so that we can, again, try this investment thing out, see if it works for our business flow and agency and the administrative burden, see what it takes to do these performance reports. Again, I just want to point out that you do have that security of the principal with these 2 LGIPs at that NAV rate, the high Standard and Poor's rating. And then that the earnings are calculated daily, which I go over the staff reports, but I haven't mentioned in this presentation. Our commercial banks evaluate at month end what your average daily balance has been and provide your dividends based on that final number. In LGIPs, you get your earnings calculated daily. So if you have a balance on June 15th of 4.5 million, and then on June 30th, you only have 2 million because City of Reading has asked for their reimbursement, you get the advantage of that 15 days of that $4.5 million earnings. So it's another cool thing about investment, but everything comes with risk here. They're only collateralized, they're not guaranteed. So we are taking an extra step to invest.
Chair, I'd make a motion to go with option number 1.
I was on this committee, so I've been on this journey for a while. I have just want to add my 2 cents. So I went and spoke to our treasurer, Greg Robinette, because this came up on our agenda as well. And my biggest issue with class is that it has only been in existence for 2 years. So, and it does a less than 60-day investment, or how they do their short-term investments. It's a list of people that are involved. I would categorize as unsophisticated. They're trying to build up a business.
You're saying people from Morgan Hill are not very smart?
I'm saying that this is
She's saying their list of investors. She's saying their list of investors seem.
all I'm saying is that Reading also was, when I talked to Greg, basically he was saying it's got a higher yield. I'd like to be able to use it and utilize it if it's going to gain me a higher yield. Because you can have a zero balance, you could trade back and forth between camp and class. If you were going to monitor it regularly, you could just switch back and forth. And he basically gave the impression that they were going to be, he wanted to have it as a tool to be able to switch back and forth and utilize the best yield at any given time. But he has the ability to do that. He has a staff to do that. We don't really have that luxury. But my concern to him as well was, well, this LGIP is only 2 years old. So if we're going to take a risk, especially in a highly volatile market, because we're in the middle of a transition, and I don't know if you're any student of history, but typically economies
I agree in that history, yes.
in the midst of presidential transitions sometimes are quite volatile. I don't know that I want to take those risks right now. In addition, just one thing I just didn't appreciate was we had a salesperson come in for class into that meeting. He came to sell his product. And when I asked who his competition was, he did not provide that. He said Leif. And when I went and did my own research, come to find out his competition really is Camp and the other entity. Also, we never got the sales pitch from Camp, never got the sales information. We got full portfolios. And if you look at the staff report, we got a ton of information on the portfolio class, but we never got it for Camp. But Camp is more established. It's been around longer. It's been doing this longer. It does have quite a bit more of assets that it manages as a whole than class. And so if you're going to take a risk, I would rather risk it on Camp than risk it on class, because it is a risk. And they're trying to build something so they can offer this higher yield as their loss leader to try to get names on a list to be able to get more business. I don't necessarily want to be utilized as a name on a list. I'd rather do something that's safer, that's going to get us a better yield than a savings account, but that isn't going to put us in any kind of jeopardy, especially since I think economically the environment could get weird, as a technical term. So my vote would be that we do Camp. I don't think we have to do the lesser amount. I think we could do all of that into Camp. I think there's a third option to just invest all of that into Camp, because then we'd get the higher yield. But I also think that regular check-ins to find out, is it working and do we like it? Because I don't need to go for broke on the first time that we're trying this. I'd rather do something that gives us a higher yield, but is more stable.
Okay.
What's a regular check-in?
At the meetings.
Okay, so every meeting.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Which
that's,
they want to do as well.
yes, that's part of the state.
They're trying to monitor this
investment
too.
policy. It's gonna have, every board meeting will be presented for the first year.
But I'm open if you have a better, I just, we have not done it. We did not actually choose to invest in class at Reading. Yet.
Okay, Aaron,
I was simply gonna say, for the reasons that Councilmember Audette said, I actually really like your suggestion, PJ, of the, of roughly 10 in each, because of the aspects of potential volatility.
diversity.
Mine is the diversity piece there. I like the WAM from class. I like the number from camp in terms of investors. Likely those investors. I think that, so 188, it's roughly like a third. Camp has roughly a third more investors with only 1.7 billion. Most of those, they are unsophisticated in class, but also in the volatility, they're less likely to make some big fund for everybody to pull their stuff out. They're likely people who are doing something similar to you. To us, because of the number that they have and the full amount of assets. So my thought was mostly the diversity piece and that it doesn't put all of our eggs in one basket. And if one of them, we have the ability to move money, correct?
Correct.
Because I think what she says is correct. I mean, City of Reading has staff who can every single day decide to play back and forth.
Correct.
And like you said, that feels like an admin lift that you should take on. That's like a game for them. So that was my suggestion in the diversity piece that I actually support that.
And I might not have mentioned this, but I clarified this with class and camp that if you have a zero balance in an account, you do not get
There's no
penalized
penalty.
for it.
There's no penalty.
So if one of these was going downhill, we can run on the bank if you want it.
Yeah, but we're
What's your
still on
thoughts
their
on this,
list.
My thoughts are more in line of being able to see how both perform. I mean, if you do all in one, for example, the camp example, we do all in that. I mean, we can still monitor class, but we're also not potentially gaining on the benefit. I mean, either one, when you look at the WAM and you look at the NAV for both of those, the fact that there's a potential higher yield, my view would be is that you have a similar risk with either of those. While class is newer, my view is also the advisors and those that are doing the investment funds are not new to doing class LGIPs. They've done a number of ones, including New York, Texas, and other locations. There's all different years of when those have been implemented, but they do have experience in those. So from that perspective, I would say they're not new to doing that work. There's California is just their 11th or 12th client from a state perspective. But I'm open to either, I think either option gives the opportunity to get a higher return on investment than what we're getting now. I think that's really what I want to focus on is the opportunity that we can leverage from that with the LGIPs.
So if class, I don't, the issue for me is not if they are savvy investors. The issue for me is they're offering a higher yield to get business, to get our names on a list. So once they get all those names on the list to get their, whatever they've established and they're getting clientele, I think that number is going to drop back down to, whatever the market has, which is why the other two are within two points of each other. So I'm just saying that if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna take the bait and make them look good.
I don't like the way in which that they came about it.
So I'm just saying, if we're gonna do that, I would want the agreement that the moment that class gets to the same yield as camp, that then we move our money over.
Well, if it's the same, why would you? If it's no different.
That's my point.
Because why have it there? If it's gonna go down at all, like what's the point of having it into,
Well, it's.
Well,
it's at
why
a spike. I'm gonna move it at
monitor,
a spike.
but why monitor two? That's more work. Why monitor two than having the one? And if we're gonna have two, that means we are gonna be willing to move. That's the point, right? We're monitoring which one's gonna give us a higher yield. If it begins to drop, then I think that we have to move it. If it drops below, I think if we're willing to move it, I would be fine with that.
Yeah, and
If we're not, then I think we should pick one.
And I think it would be up to the board's discretion if you see and this is part of the reasons why we're adding in the reporting, is so that you guys can be that oversight where you're like, hey, we've had 3 quarters consistently of camp being higher yield of 30, 40, 50
I think it would
basis
just be
points.
two.
And you would just,
I mean, if it's trending.
She's just giving an example. She's saying if you notice a trend, you have the ability to make
Yeah.
it.
I know
and you
there's-
should.
There's no penalty for having 0, but is there a penalty for having 0 for 2 years? Is there like, or is there a penalty to withdraw? What are the penalties for further action?
I would have to.
And for how long can you be at 0?
I'd have to look into that further.
My understanding, there isn't any penalty.
Yeah, I don't want to
I don't-
say that for
Not
sure, but
Forever,
Our
but I mean like
understanding
at
was
some
right
point.
now, if we were to create accounts now, in 3 months from now, we just said, hey, camper class is not performing as well. We want to move all those account funds to the other one.
Yeah, but for how long? So how long can you have a 0 balance?
We would have to look into that to actually.
Yeah,
inspect
I'll
that.
ask.
How long could you have a 0 balance for? And then what's the penalty to withdraw completely? Or once you get in, you're in.
So okay, so to cancel your
Yeah,
membership.
like what happens if you're out? Like, I mean, is it once you're in, you're in? And you can go 0, but you can only go 0 for so long, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't want to give you the wrong answer, because I don't want to lead by impression. So I want to give you the right answer to those questions. And I'll have to ask both Class A and Camp what the answer to that is.
Yeah.
Because their
Yeah.
websites, both of them are pretty clear, like no fees, no penalties, no 0 balance, no minimums, no maximum, like it's all sales, So I would like to explicitly ask that question.
What I would like to also propose is that the board wants to give us a general direction of which investment approach you'd like to use. We can get those additional questions answered and we can coordinate with fiscal and policy, because on a regular basis, our fiscal and policy committee will we coordinate with on a more regular basis and then come to you each board meeting. And so we can get into those questions, have a meeting, talk about that, move forward to start that process and then be able to invest those funds on everything. So that would be my suggestion for how you.
Share what's your thought on these two? Any idea?
Yeah, I think diversity helps, but I would not go to one just because it gives you 0.2% higher. I'd just write that off and say they're all equal. They're in the 5% rate. But I want, how much does LAIF give us in?
So LAIF is consistently, it's in the 4.2, 4.3 is what they did in 2023. And so that is that 80, 90 basis points difference that you'll consistently see between these LGIPs and LAIF. LAIF has certain restrictions on its participants, like $1,000 increment withdrawals and
But that's not a
quarterly
problem.
reporting. And what I'm saying is you cannot get down to the penny. So there is.
Oh, I see.
Because we're dealing proportionally with such small amounts. If City of Reading is going to ask for 1.347 million, with a couple change, it would be really nice for me to be able to track that to the exact rather than LAIF, but LAIF has been around for a long time. The only thing that I have about LAIF is 5-star, our commercial bank is currently matching that rate. So why wouldn't you keep your stuff at 5-star with that FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation insured deposits on your principal if you're going to get that same return. So as far as risk is concerned, it wouldn't meet policy to move our funds into LAIF if we're already getting that rate at a commercial bank that has insured principal.
Well, then sometimes I wonder why we're even looking at getting an extra 1%, like if the risk is really going up. Because if we lose, I mean, you say it's invested, but I remember people in the 80s that were going for the high rates of 15 and 19%, and it was protected, but they didn't see their money for 2 years.
Right.
So there is a risk. You might get it back, but we might need some of it. And they'll say, yep, we're going to give it to you, but it won't be there when we need it.
So these are collateralized by California law, by US treasuries. And so they'll have a letter of credit from like the Federal Home Mortgage Bank or something like that, that will say SRTA is collateralized up to $183 million, you know, or so, like I have a letter of credit from like Five Star, for instance. And go ahead, sorry. And so, again, if the whole market crashes, everyone's gonna be in panic and everyone's gonna run on the bank. Everyone's gonna be waiting on their funds. So that it's still gonna happen.
But if only one crashes, then you're only waiting on that one.
The likelihood of only one crashing in a run on the
No,
bank
he's just saying
situation
we have our
is-
money tied up in two different ones, so we're gonna have to deal with two different agencies we're trying to get our money from, not if they crash, they'll both crash. But now we have money in two different places. I know I wouldn't vote for any of these without knowing what the exit penalties are.
Okay.
Or how long you can stay at zero. So if we can play these off of each other, great.
Okay.
You know, and get the most money for it, whatever, if we have the time and staff to be able to play them off of each other. That's great, but I would want to know what happens if we try to get out of it? What if we're like, this isn't working for us and this is too much work, or this isn't, you know, whatever. How do we get out and what the penalty is?
With maybe endorsing option one at that caveat where we will follow up on what this minimal zero balance, you know.
Without there being like a motion that was option
This
one
policy.
I
to
personally,
proceed as long as there's no.
okay, this is just my own personality. I am a risk averse. So the risking it into two as opposed to one may sound like you're diversifying your risk, but I think you're doubling your risk. And so I just have a different perspective. It doesn't make it right. It's probably wrong, but whatever. And honestly, I've only had a pitch person come from class. I haven't had the pitch from camp. I don't know all of its benefits. So, and I've asked for that and I don't have it in here. I don't have their portfolio. I don't have a detailed description of all that stuff.
So I did provide you the portfolio breakdowns.
Yeah, that's, but
and-
I have classes. I've been over it several times. I didn't get that. This is classes. That's one. This is all of classes stuff.
And
So
I
I
have
didn't have-
those for camp and I can.
Yeah,
forward
I
those to
didn't, I
you.
didn't get those to be able to study those to go over it. I just know that the city of Reading uses CAM. We've used it for years. I know that it has a reputation. They've used it for years. And so if I'm gonna take a risk, I wanna take on something more established.
Yeah.
But at this point, if you're gonna go to the two, I do wanna, that strategy of using two, I would wanna know how you get out of it. Is there a penalty to get out? Can you keep to zero balance so that we can play them off of each other? And I don't know that information. So I wouldn't.
So yeah, so with that, I mean, one thing we could do here is we can take these questions and we can table this item to the February meeting, if that's more preferred, and then have a better, you know, full understanding from that perspective of those questions. We can do that as well.
And now there's gonna be so many more people that wanna be on the fiscal policy committee. That's really what we just did. We
Did you
just sold
say
that
until
one.
February meeting?
That's like.
February.
Yeah,
But
that's
how
next
long,
meeting.
if we make a decision right now, do you have until implementation of you being able to make moves with money? Because you are also talking,
Yeah.
so a couple of days, but we're
Yeah.
also talking about an 8-week delay in investment ability.
Yeah.
The only thing is, unless the board wanted to
It was 5.75.
have us look into this, I would say with the holidays and everything, we would need probably until at least after the first of the year to get some answers back. We could always do a special meeting in January if that was what the board wanted to do, but.
What would happen if we said, let's cut the amount we're going to invest to half, put 10 million, put it in camp from now and then wait till February to decide what to do with the rest? And that way we started, but we're not committed quite as much. So we only have half the risk. Because we only have half our funds in it, but we only get half the
That
benefit.
doesn't still answer Vanessa's question.
I think, well, I would, obviously that's more, I'm more comfortable with camp than class. However, if they do then decide to go in, what if we can't get ourselves out of
But we
camp?
could go in February, we could make another decision.
This isn't a time sensitive issue.
Right,
Yeah,
we're not in a rush.
So
I think we should. It's
So-
okay with you.
wait till February for everything.
I think so.
I don't think that
If
we
you
have
don't-
heard
if-
from Counselor Moore from Christ.
It's not a time sensitive issue. If you want to kick it down the road and get some answers, you can do the whole thing in February. I mean, if there's issues yet to be resolved by some board members, why not just let those issues get resolved and consider the matter as a whole.
Well, the Y is 2 months worth of interest.
Yeah,
2 months worth.
It's $100,000.
So, okay.
That
The-
wasn't one of my portfolios.
Once you get it up.
No, I mean, I kind of like, I like the diversity. I like the comparison. I would like to put it in two, but Tanessa's much more involved in this than I am. So I would respect her, her input there and her knowledge. So, but I like Greg's idea. Let's go ahead and invest half of it now and what we're comfortable with and look into the exit strategies of the other fund and come back to that in February.
I need motions from the board.
So I make a motion to put the amount into class.
Camp.
Yes, and then give back to us in February on class, decide whether we want to put the other 10 million in there.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Kellstrom.
Can you say it again, Chris, just so I
So we're
understand?
going to invest that bottom number, $10,363,670.90 into camp for now, today or tomorrow, or whatever, this week. And then next board meeting, she's going to have the exit strategies of the class so that we know what our penalties are if we go to zero, et cetera, et cetera. And if that looks good, we'll invest that amount into class. If it's not a good plan, then we'll put that amount back into camp.
I do word stuff, so it's all.
And see, I kind of am
I'm
too.
more of a team player, but it's public's money, so I'm a lot more cautious.
Team equals
Yeah.
high risk.
No, I'm saying for me personally, so when we talk about that, so I don't, what Aaron and Patrick talked about, I lean more towards that, but I can go with what Chris.
Patrick just seconded.
I know.
This thing all burns, I'm not gonna be here.
Nice. Hey, this is going right back to the Narcan vending machine conversation.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm gonna.
Okay, we have,
Thank you for. Yes. Let's hope the implementation.
It's my baby.
so we do need to take a vote.
Yes, Tara, I do need a vote.
Public comment.
Yes, public comment. Because if we go down, we want anybody who comments to help fund the lot. So who would like to speak?
Put their skin in the game.
Seeing none, it's all on the board if we lose.
That's right.
Okay, do you want a roll call or you want a voice vote? Amy?
It's up to you, Chair, how you want me to call it.
Well, I think we'll just do a voice vote, so they'll never really know. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that means everybody voted for it.
All right, we'll follow up on this item later and take your direction.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone, and your
Thank you
patience.
for all the work.
Thank you very
Mayor
much.
Watkins, can you tell me
Yes.
who was the second? We had a first by Councilor
Jones, yeah.
Jones. Okay.
Kellstrom and Jones.
Not reading slides.
And if everybody could stick around for just a minute, I do have.
I know.
Skipping some.
paper for you to sign. Everybody.
Okay, we're sticking around for something, but we do have item 15, any future topics? Hearing none, we are adjourned then.
Great
Thanks,
job.
Chair.